Tonight, a woman will destroy her entire life in front of the whole city. She won't cry. She won't scream. She'll just stand under the diamond chandelier, watching the giant LED screen show her husband kissing another woman, and smile coldly. Because the man who betrayed her doesn't know that his wife is the sister of the most dangerous crime boss on the East Coast. And the war has just begun. Follow this story to the very end. Like and comment where you're watching from so I know how far this story has progressed. Now, let's begin. The champagne tasted like metal against Seraphina Vale's tongue. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, one hand wrapped around the stem of her glass, the other pressed flat against the cool silk of her silver dress. Around her, Atlanta's wealthiest moved like sharks in evening wear. Lawyers who'd buried bodies in paperwork, CEOs who'd crushed competitors without mercy, politicians who smiled with teeth sharpened on lies. She belonged here. That was the sickest part. 10 years of playing the role had carved it into her bones. Adrian was somewhere across the room. She could feel him the way you feel a splinter working deeper under your skin. Her husband, the golden boy, the man everyone loved. Seraphina took another sip and let the bitterness coat her throat. The gala was the kind of event that cost more than most people earned in a year just to attend. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings like frozen waterfalls. The marble floors reflected everything. The designer gowns, the practiced smiles, the carefully maintained masks everyone wore. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in one corner while waiters glided between clusters of guests carrying trays of champagne and caviar. Seraphina had stopped tasting the food at these events years ago. It all turned to ash in her mouth anyway. Mrs. Voss? A board member from one of Adrian's shell companies appeared at her elbow. Thomas something. She'd met him a dozen times and forgotten him a dozen times. You look radiant as always. Thank you. The smile came automatically. She'd perfected it somewhere around year 3 of the marriage. Warm, but not too warm. Interested, but not desperate. The kind of smile that made people feel seen without actually revealing anything at all. Thomas droned on about quarterly earnings or market projections or some other shit she didn't care about. Seraphina nodded in the right places, made appropriate sounds of interest, and let her eyes drift across the ballroom. That's when she saw him. Adrian stood near the bar, one hand resting on the small of another woman's back. The touch was casual, familiar. The kind of gesture that comes from muscle memory rather than thought. The woman laughed at something he said, tilting her head back in a way that made her throat look long and vulnerable. Vivian Cross. Adrian's assistant. Of course it was his fucking assistant. Seraphina's grip tightened on her champagne glass. The crystal bit into her palm, but she didn't loosen her hold. She watched Adrian lean in close to whisper something in Vivian's ear. Watched the way Vivian's eyes went half-lidded with pleasure. Watched her husband, the man who'd promised her forever in a ceremony that cost more than most houses, touch another woman like he owned her. Thomas was still talking, something about diversification strategies. "Excuse me," Seraphina interrupted. Her voice came out smooth as glass. "I need to find the ladies' room." She didn't wait for his response. She moved through the crowd with the kind of grace that comes from years of practice, her heels clicking against marble with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Fast. Too fast. She could feel her pulse hammering in her throat. The bathroom was mercifully empty. Seraphina locked herself in the largest stall and leaned against the door, pressing her forehead to the cool metal. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. She'd known about the affairs for years. That wasn't the problem. The problem was how good Adrian had gotten at making her feel crazy for suspecting. How easily he could flip the script until she was the one apologizing for being paranoid, for not trusting him, for ruining perfectly good evenings with her insecurity. Gaslighting. That was the clinical term. Seraphina preferred to think of it as slow-motion murder. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The message was from a blocked number. No words. Just a file attachment. Seraphina's thumb hovered over the screen. Some part of her, the part that still wanted to believe in happy endings and faithful husbands, screamed at her not to open it. But that part had been dying for years, bleeding out slowly in designer bedrooms and empty dinner conversations. She opened the file. The first image loaded slowly, like the universe was giving her one last chance to turn back. Hotel security footage. Time-stamped 3 months ago. Adrian's face was clearly visible as he pressed Vivian against a wall, his mouth on her neck, her legs wrapped around his waist. Seraphina scrolled. There were more. Dozens more. Different hotels, different cities, different positions, all with the same woman. But it wasn't just the photos. The file contained spreadsheets, bank statements, routing numbers for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies with names that sounded legitimate but led nowhere. Seraphina recognized some of the transactions. Charity donations that Adrian had made such a public show of, investment deals he'd closed with handshakes and press conferences. All of it dirty. All of it laundered through a network so complex it had taken someone with serious resources to untangle. The final document made her stomach drop. Contracts. Partnership agreements. Between Adrian's companies and organizations with names she recognized from her childhood. Russian names. The kind of names that came attached to body counts and federal investigations. Her brother's rivals. The same people who'd tried to kill Lucian Vale 3 times in the past decade. Adrian wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal, and he'd been stupid enough or arrogant enough to do business with people who wanted her brother dead. Seraphina's hands stopped shaking. Something cold and clear settled over her like a second skin. She knew that feeling. She'd grown up with it. It was the same feeling that came before violence, before decisions that couldn't be unmade. She'd spent 10 years trying to be normal, trying to distance herself from the blood and chaos of the Vale family name. She'd married Adrian specifically because he was the opposite of everything her brother represented. Legitimate, respectable, clean. What a fucking joke. Seraphina deleted the message and dropped her phone back in her clutch. She checked her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair still fell in glossy waves over her shoulders. She looked like exactly what she was supposed to be. A wealthy man's beautiful, harmless wife. She smiled at her reflection. The woman staring back looked like a stranger. Time to burn it all down. The ballroom felt different when she returned. Or maybe she was different. Seraphina moved through the crowd with purpose now, her eyes scanning for the AV booth tucked discreetly in the corner. The tech crew was small, 2 guys in black shirts hunched over laptops and soundboards, making sure the promotional video played smoothly on the massive LED screens that dominated 3 walls. "Excuse me." Seraphina appeared at the booth's entrance like a ghost. Both techs jumped. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my husband, Adrian Voss, is about to make a surprise announcement, and we need to load his presentation." She held up a USB drive that she definitely hadn't been carrying 5 minutes ago. The techs exchanged glances. "Ma'am, we usually need advance notice for—" "I know, and I apologize." Seraphina leaned in slightly, dropping her voice to something intimate and conspiratorial. "It's a big donation announcement, very last minute. Adrian's been planning it for weeks, but he's terrible with technology." She laughed, light and self-deprecating. "You know how these finance guys are. Brilliant with numbers, helpless with everything else." The older tech smiled despite himself. "Yeah, my dad's the same way. Would you mind terribly? It's just a quick video, maybe 2 minutes. I promise Adrian will mention how helpful you both were in his speech." She widened her eyes slightly, adding just a hint of desperation. "I'll be in so much trouble if this doesn't go smoothly." The younger tech was already reaching for the USB drive. "Sure, no problem. When do you want us to play it?" "Give me 5 minutes to get Adrian's attention. I'll text you." She rattled off a number she'd memorized years ago. A burner phone she'd bought and never used, just in case. Just in case of what? She'd never been sure. Until now. The tech entered the number into his phone. "Got it. We'll be ready." "You're lifesavers." Seraphina touched the older tech's arm briefly, gratefully. "Really? Thank you so much." She disappeared back into the crowd before they could ask any more questions. Finding Adrian took less than 30 seconds. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by the usual crowd of admirers and ass-kissers. Vivian stood just outside the circle, close enough to be available, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Amateur hour. Seraphina pulled out her real phone and sent a single word to the burner number. "Now." The LED screens flickered. The promotional video cut out mid-sentence, replaced by black. Someone in the crowd made a confused sound. The string quartet faltered. Then the first image appeared. Adrian, Vivian, the hotel hallway, his mouth on her throat. The ballroom went silent in the way that only happens when something truly catastrophic is unfolding. That terrible, anticipatory quiet before the scream. The slideshow continued, image after image, video clips with audio, Adrian's voice, breathless and rough, saying things he'd never said to his wife. The affair wasn't just sexual, it was intimate, loving, the kind of thing that hurts worse than violence. But Seraphina didn't stop there. The bank statements appeared next. Account numbers, transaction histories, millions of dollars flowing through shell companies with addresses that didn't exist. The crowd's silence shifted from shock to horror as they recognized their own names in some of the documents. Board members, investors, people who'd trusted Adrian with their money, their reputations, all of it dirty. The final documents hit like a bomb. Contracts with organizations everyone in the room recognized, Russian names, Serbian names, organizations that the FBI had been investigating for years, weapons trafficking, money laundering, ties to political corruption that stretched from Atlanta to Washington. Adrian Voss wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal, and he'd just been exposed in front of every powerful person in the city. Seraphina found Adrian in the crowd. He was frozen, his face the color of old concrete. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. People were backing away from him like he was radioactive. Cameras flashed. Everyone was recording now, phones held high, capturing his destruction in real time. Vivian had disappeared. Smart girl. Seraphina raised her champagne glass in a private toast and drank deep. The metal taste was gone. Now it just tasted like victory. Adrian's eyes found her across the ballroom. For a moment they just stared at each other. She saw the exact instant he understood, the way his expression shifted from shock to betrayal to fury. He started moving toward her, pushing through the crowd with violence barely contained. "You bitch!" His voice was low and shaking when he reached her. "You fucking bitch! What did you do?" "Me?" Seraphina's smile was all teeth. "I didn't do anything, Adrian. That's your life up there. Your choices. Your crimes. I'm just the messenger." "You don't understand." He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Several people gasped. "Those people, the ones in those contracts, they're going to fucking kill me. Do you understand that? They're going to kill me." "Then I guess you should have been more careful about who you fucked, literally and figuratively." Adrian's hand tightened. For a second, she thought he might actually hit her. Part of her wanted him to. It would make everything simpler. But before he could do anything, the ballroom doors burst open. Federal agents poured in like a flood. FBI, DEA, Homeland Security. They moved with the kind of coordinated precision that comes from months of planning. Someone had tipped them off. Someone had told them exactly where to find Adrian Voss and exactly what evidence to look for. Seraphina had made that call 2 hours ago. Adrian's grip on her arm went slack. He stared at the agents swarming toward him with the expression of a man watching his own execution. "Sarah, Adrian Voss," the lead agent's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You're under arrest for money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud." The list went on and on. Adrian's knees actually buckled when they cuffed him. He looked at Seraphina one more time, his face crumpling into something that might have been tears or rage or just pure disbelief. She felt nothing. The agents led him away while cameras continued to flash and the crowd pressed in from all sides, everyone trying to get a better view of the wreckage. Seraphina stood in the center of it all, untouched and untouchable in her silver dress. Someone touched her shoulder. She spun, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she hadn't carried in 10 years. "Easy." The voice was familiar, deep, calm. "It's just me." Seraphina Vale stood behind her like a shadow made flesh. Her brother. The man she'd been running from for a decade. He looked exactly the same. Tall and lean with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars and moved with the kind of controlled grace that came from knowing he was the most dangerous person in any room. "Hello, little sister." Lucian's smile was slight and didn't reach his eyes. Quite a show. Seraphina's throat went tight. She hadn't seen him in 3 years, hadn't spoken to him in 5. She'd been so careful to keep her distance, to maintain the fiction that she'd left that life behind. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting family." His gaze swept the ballroom, the chaos, the federal agents, the ruins of Adrian's life. Though it looks like you didn't need my help. I didn't ask for it. No, you didn't. Lucian's expression shifted into something harder. But you're going to need it anyway. The people Adrian did business with, they're not going to take this lightly, and now that your face is all over the news as the wife who brought him down, you're a target. Seraphina wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could handle herself, that she didn't need protection, that she was done with the Vale family and everything it represented. But Lucien's eyes held something that stopped her cold. Not concern, not even affection, just cold, calculated assessment. Come home, Sarah. Let me keep you safe. It wasn't a request. Behind them, federal agents were already starting to clear the ballroom. Someone was shouting about evidence preservation. Someone else was crying. One of Adrian's business partners probably, realizing their own finances were about to be dragged into the light. Seraphina looked at her brother, at the man who represented everything she'd tried to escape, and she realized with sickening clarity that she'd just traded one cage for another. Fine. The word tasted like poison. But just until this dies down, Lucien's smile widened slightly. Of course, just until it dies down. He offered his arm like they were at a normal society function, instead of standing in the wreckage of multiple felony arrests. Seraphina took it because she didn't have a choice, because the alternative was facing the fallout alone. They walked out of the ballroom together while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions and federal agents tried to maintain some semblance of order. Behind them, LED screens still displayed Adrian's crimes on an endless loop. Outside, 3 black SUVs waited at the curb. Men in dark suits, Lucien's men, stood at attention. They opened doors without being asked. Everything moved with the kind of smooth efficiency that came from years of practice. Seraphina slid into the middle vehicle. Lucien followed, the door closing behind them with a sound like a coffin sealing shut. The SUV pulled away from the curb, and Atlanta's glittering skyline began to blur past the tinted windows. Seraphina watched the city lights streak and fade, each one a reminder of the life she'd just destroyed. How did you know? She asked finally. About Adrian. About everything. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. I've always known, Sarah. From the beginning. Something cold slithered down her spine. What? Adrian Voss, his background, his business dealings, his connections to the Volkov organization. Lucian's gaze stayed fixed on the window. I knew before your wedding. The words hit her like a physical blow. You knew he was dirty? That he was working with your enemies, and you just let me marry him anyway? It was useful. Lucian's tone never changed. Still that same flat, emotionless delivery. Having you connected to his operations gave me leverage. Intel, a way to monitor the Volkov family's movements in the southeast. Seraphina couldn't breathe. The SUV's interior suddenly felt too small, too hot, the air too thick. You used me. You used my marriage as a fucking intelligence operation. I protected you. Now Lucian did look at her, and his eyes were cold. Do you think Adrian Voss would have survived 10 years married to a Vale if I hadn't allowed it? Every breath he took was a gift from me. Every day you spent with him was because I permitted it. You let him hurt me. Her voice cracked on the last word. You watched him cheat and lie and break me down piece by piece, and you did nothing. I gave you a normal life. Lucian's jaw tightened. Or as close to normal as someone like you could have. You wanted out of this world, Sarah. You said so yourself, so I let you go. I let you play house with your banker husband and pretend you were just another society wife. But don't mistake my allowance for ignorance. The SUV turned onto a private road. Trees closed in on both sides, blocking out the city lights. They were heading to the Vale estate, the compound where Seraphina had grown up, the place she'd sworn never to return to. I want out, she said. After this is over, after Adrian's trial, I'm gone. I'm leaving Atlanta, leaving the country if I have to, and this time you're not going to stop me. Lucien smiled. It was the kind of smile that preceded violence. We'll see. The estate appeared through the trees, a massive colonial structure surrounded by high walls and discreet security measures, guard stations disguised as groundskeeper sheds, cameras hidden in ornamental light fixtures. armed men who moved through shadows like they were born there. Home. The SUV stopped at the main entrance. One of Lucien's men opened Seraphina's door. She climbed out on shaking legs, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel drive. Everything looked the same. The white columns, the wraparound porch, the fucking fountain in the circular driveway with its marble statues of angels that had given her nightmares as a child. She'd been so sure she'd escaped this place. "Welcome back," Lucien said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. "Your old room is ready. I've had it maintained, just in case." Of course he had, because Lucien Vale planned for every contingency, including the one where his sister came crawling back to him after destroying her marriage and painting a target on her own back. Seraphina wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to do anything but walk through those doors and surrender to the inevitable. But she was so tired, and scared, and alone. So she climbed the steps, pushed through the heavy front doors, and stepped back into the life she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. The interior was exactly as she remembered. Hardwood floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of dead ancestors whose crimes were legend, furniture that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. A young woman appeared in the doorway to the sitting room, mid-20s, dark hair, pretty in a sharp-edged way. She looked at Seraphina with something between curiosity and calculation. "Sarah, this is Elena Volkov," Lucien said. "She's been consulting with me on some business matters. Elena, my sister Seraphina." Volkov. The name hit like a bullet. Elena smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Seraphina's instincts scream warnings. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Voss. I've heard so much about you." "It's just Seraphina now." She kept her voice level despite the ice spreading through her veins. "I think I'm done being Mrs. Voss." "Of course." Elena's smile widened. "Seraphina, then. I hope we'll get to know each other better. I think we have a lot to talk about." Lucien touched Seraphina's elbow, guiding her toward the stairs. "Elena will be staying with us for a while. She's under my protection while we sort out some complications with her family's organization." The Volkov family. The same people Adrian had been doing business with. The same people whose names appeared in all those incriminating documents currently in FBI custody. And now one of them was living in her brother's house. Seraphina climbed the stairs like a woman walking to her execution. Her old bedroom door was exactly where she remembered it, third on the left, near the east wing. The door wasn't locked. It opened easily under her hand. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Her teenage bedroom preserved like a museum exhibit. Band posters on the walls, books she'd read in high school, even her old laptop sitting on the desk, probably still loaded with terrible poetry and angry journal entries about wanting to be normal. She closed the door and locked it. Then she crossed to the window and looked out at the grounds. Security lights illuminated the perimeter. She could see men patrolling in pairs, their weapons barely visible under jackets. A prison with good landscaping. Her phone buzzed. She'd forgotten she was still carrying it. The screen lit up with notifications, hundreds of them. Texts, calls, social media mentions. The story was everywhere. Adrian's arrest, her role in his exposure, photos of her walking out of the Gala on Lucien's arm. One text stood out from a number she didn't recognize. "You just made a very dangerous mistake. They're coming for you." Seraphina deleted it and turned off her phone. She sat on the edge of her childhood bed and stared at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore. They looked steady, strong, like they belonged to someone capable of pulling triggers and making hard choices. Maybe they always had. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Sarah?" Lucien's voice, careful and controlled. "Can I come in?" "No?" "We need to talk about security protocols. There are some people you need to avoid, some places you can't go." "I said no, Lucien." Silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. Seraphina lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Glow-in-the-dark stars still dotted the plaster, a remnant from when she was 8 and afraid of the dark. She'd put them up herself, standing on her desk chair, carefully arranging them into constellations she'd learned from library books. She'd been afraid of so many things back then. The dark, strangers, her father's rages, the sounds that came from the basement when Lucien's men were dealing with problems. Now she wasn't afraid of anything except the growing certainty that she'd just made everything infinitely worse. Outside her window, she could hear voices. Elena and Lucien talking in low tones on the porch below. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the rhythm of conspiracy when she heard it. Something was wrong. Something beyond Adrian's arrest and her return to the family compound. Something in the way Elena had looked at her, in the way Lucien had been too calm, too prepared. She sat up and moved to the window, pressing herself against the wall where she couldn't be seen from below. The conversation continued. Elena laughed at something, a sound like breaking glass. Then Lucien's voice, clearer now. She doesn't know anything. Keep it that way. And if she finds out, she won't. I've made sure of that. Elena said something else, but a car engine starting nearby drowned it out. When the sound faded, both of them had moved away from directly beneath her window. Seraphina's hands were shaking again. What didn't she know? What was Lucien hiding? She thought about the flash drive, the evidence that had destroyed Adrian. It had come from a blocked number, but someone had compiled it. Someone had done months of research, untangled complex financial networks, and handed her exactly what she needed to burn her husband's life to the ground. She'd assumed it was a whistleblower, one of Adrian's enemies, maybe even federal investigators trying to build a case. But what if it was Lucien? What if her brother had orchestrated the entire thing? Not just allowed Adrian's crimes, but actively documented them, waited for the perfect moment, and then put the weapon in Seraphina's hand, knowing exactly what she'd do with it. The thought made her nauseous, because if that was true, then she hadn't destroyed Adrian. Lucien had, using her as the trigger, and if he'd manipulated her once, he could do it again. Seraphina backed away from the window and looked around her childhood bedroom with new eyes. Not a refuge, a cell. The door had a lock, but she'd bet money Lucien had a key. The windows were original hardwood, beautiful, expensive, impossible to open quietly. She was trapped. The realization settled over her like cold water. She'd walked back into this house of her own free will. She'd put herself in Lucien's power because she was scared and alone and didn't have anywhere else to go. Classic manipulation? Her brother's specialty. A sound outside her door made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone standing just on the other side, not quite touching the wood, breathing quietly, waiting. Seraphina grabbed the only weapon within reach, a heavy bookend shaped like a rearing horse. She moved to the side of the door, raised the bookend, and waited. The footsteps moved away after 30 seconds. Whoever it was didn't knock, didn't announce themselves, just stood there long enough to make sure she knew she was being watched. Message received. Seraphina set down the bookend and sank onto her bed. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was insane. She was in her childhood home, surrounded by her brother's men, supposedly under protection. So why did she feel like prey? Her phone buzzed again despite being turned off. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Another text from the unknown number. Lucien Vale is not who you think he is. Trust no one in that house, especially not Elena Volkov. Before she could respond, the message deleted itself. Seraphina dropped the phone like it had burned her. Paranoid or not, something was very wrong. She could feel it in her bones, in the same instinct that had told her to destroy Adrian, in the same voice that had been screaming warnings since Elena Volkov smiled at her in the foyer. She needed information, needed to understand what she'd really walked into. The laptop on her desk was old, but it still powered on when she pressed the button. While it booted up, she checked the door again, still locked, and pulled the curtains closed over the windows. The laptop's browser history was years old, teenage angst and college application research, but it still had access to the estate's Wi-Fi network. Lucien's network, protected by security measures that would make most hackers weep. Good thing Seraphina had grown up watching her brother work. She pulled up a command prompt and started typing. Muscle memory from years of watching over Lucien's shoulder, absorbing information even when she pretended not to care. Server names, access codes, backdoors that Lucien had built into his own system because he trusted himself more than any external security. The files opened like flowers. Financial records, business transactions, communications with people whose names made Seraphina's blood run cold. Everything was there, meticulously documented and encrypted with patterns she recognized. She found the folder labeled Voss_Adrian and opened it. The timestamp made her stomach drop. Lucien had started the file 12 years ago, 2 years before she'd even met Adrian, before the wedding, Before everything, he hadn't just known about Adrian's crimes. He'd been tracking them, documenting them, waiting. And there, buried in a subfolder marked Insurance, the exact same evidence that had been sent to her phone tonight. Lucien had destroyed Adrian, used Seraphina as the weapon, and now she was here, trapped in his compound, exactly where he wanted her. The question was why. Seraphina kept digging, found more files, more names, organizations. The Volkov family featured prominently, their operations detailed with the kind of precision that came from inside knowledge. Then she found Elena's file. Elena Volkov, age 27, sister to Dmitry Volkov, current head of the Volkov crime organization. Dmitry had been murdered 6 months ago, found in a warehouse with 2 bullets in the back of his head, execution style. The primary suspect, according to Lucien's files, Seraphina Vale himself. Elena wasn't just a guest in the estate. She was bait. Or leverage. Or both. And Seraphina was apparently part of whatever game her brother was playing. A sound outside her door again. Closer this time. The doorknob turned slowly, testing the lock. Seraphina slammed the laptop shut and dove for the bookend. The door rattled once, twice, then stopped. Seraphina. Elena's voice, sweet and poisonous. I know you're awake. We should talk. About your brother. About what really happened to mine. Go away. I have something you need to see. Evidence. About Lucien. About what he's been doing while you were playing house with your criminal husband. A pause. Don't you want to know the truth? Yes. God, yes. But every instinct screamed not to open that door. Leave it outside. I'll look at it in the morning. Elena laughed. You don't trust me. Smart. But I'm not your enemy, Seraphina. Your brother is. And if you don't believe me now, you will soon. Footsteps retreated again. Seraphina waited a full 5 minutes before unlocking the door and cracking it open. A flash drive sat on the floor outside. Black. Unmarked. Exactly like the one that had destroyed Adrian. Seraphina picked it up with shaking hands and locked herself back inside. This was a trap. Had to be. Elena was probably working with Lucien. This was all part of some elaborate manipulation designed to… what? Test her loyalty? Break her down? Turn her into some kind of weapon? But what if it wasn't? What if Elena was telling the truth? Seraphina stared at the flash drive until her vision blurred. Then she plugged it into the laptop and opened the files. What she found made her wish she hadn't. The files loaded one by one, each more damning than the last. Seraphina sat hunched over the old laptop, the blue glow washing her face pale as she scrolled through evidence that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her brother. Audio recordings. Lucien's voice, cold and measured, ordering hits on rivals. Not just Dmitry Volkov, dozens of others. Names she recognized from news reports about unsolved murders stretching back years. Bodies found in rivers, in burned-out warehouses, in cars at the bottom of quarries. Financial records showing money flowing through offshore accounts, not just from legitimate businesses, but from weapons trafficking, drug distribution networks, and something labeled simply as acquisitions that made her stomach turn when she read the details. Human trafficking. Girls as young as 15 moved through ports Lucien controlled. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from vomiting. The worst part wasn't the crimes themselves. Growing up as a Vale, she'd always known her brother lived in shadows. She'd accepted it the way you accept gravity, an unchangeable fact of existence. The worst part was the folder labeled Seraphina_contingency. Inside, a complete dossier on her life for the past 10 years. Photos of her and Adrian at restaurants, benefits, on vacation. Transcripts of phone conversations she'd thought were private, emails between her and friends who'd slowly drifted away as her marriage deteriorated. Medical records from the therapist she'd seen briefly 3 years ago before Adrian convinced her she didn't need help. Every moment of her supposed freedom had been monitored, documented, archived. But that wasn't the contingency. The contingency was a contract, dated 6 months ago, between Lucien Vale and the remnants of the Volkov organization. An agreement to merge operations, pool resources, expand territory from Atlanta to Boston. The price? Seraphina. Not literally. Lucien wasn't selling her, but he was offering her up as a symbol, The Vale family reaching out to their former enemies, binding the alliance through blood. She was supposed to marry Dmitry Volkov's younger brother, Alexei, in a ceremony that would legitimize the merger and bring peace to 2 decades of gang warfare. Adrian's arrest wasn't about justice. It was about clearing the way. Seraphina slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen cracked. She couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, walls closing in. She stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on her face until her skin burned. Her reflection looked back at her from the mirror, makeup smeared, hair falling loose from its careful arrangement, eyes wild and unfocused. She looked like her mother in the weeks before she died, before she'd accidentally overdosed on pills in a bathtub while Lucian was conveniently out of town. No. The word came out strangled. No, no, no. She'd trusted him. Despite everything, despite knowing what he was capable of, she'd believed Lucian when he said he wanted to protect her, that he was keeping her safe, but he'd never been protecting her. He'd been preserving an asset. A knock at the bedroom door made her jump so hard she knocked over the water glass. It shattered against the tile. "Sarah," Lucian's voice, calm as always. "I heard something break. Are you all right?" She looked at the door, at the lock that suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. "I'm fine. Just clumsy." "Open the door." "I said I'm fine." "Open the door, Seraphina." Not a request anymore. The tone he used with subordinates who had disappointed him. Her hand moved to the lock before she could stop herself. Decades of conditioning, of knowing that defying Lucian had consequences. She twisted the deadbolt and stepped back. Lucian entered like he owned the room. Because he did. He owned the whole fucking house, the grounds, probably half the city. His eyes swept over her, cataloging the broken glass, the laptop with its cracked screen, her disheveled appearance. "You've been doing research." Not a question. Seraphina's throat closed up. She couldn't form words. Lucian crossed to the desk and opened the laptop. The screen flickered back to life despite the crack. He looked at the files still open, the evidence of his crimes displayed in neat rows. His expression didn't change. "Elena gave you this." He said it like he was commenting on the weather. "Does it matter where it came from?" "It matters that you believed it." Lucian closed the laptop gently. "It matters that you'd rather trust the sister of a man I killed than your own brother." "You were going to sell me." The words burst out harsh and accusing. "To the Volkovs, like I'm some kind of commodity." "I was going to save your life." Lucian's voice stayed level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "The marriage alliance would have protected you, made you untouchable. No one would dare move against Alexei Volkov's wife." "I don't want to marry Alexei Volkov. I don't want to marry anyone. I want to be free." "There is no freedom." Lucien moved closer. She could smell his cologne, expensive, familiar, suffocating. "Not for people like us. You can choose your cage, but you can't escape it. I was offering you a gilded one. Elena's offering you a grave." "How do I know you're not the one offering the grave?" Seraphina backed up until her spine hit the wall. "How do I know any of this is real? Maybe Elena's files are fake. Maybe yours are. Maybe everything is just another layer of lies. You want truth?" Lucian's mask finally cracked. Anger bled through, hot and immediate. "Fine. Truth. I've been cleaning up your messes for 30 years. Dad wanted to drown you when you were born. Said daughters were liabilities. I'm the reason you survived past infancy. I'm the reason you got to go to regular school instead of being locked in this house. I'm the reason Adrian Voss didn't end up in the river the first time he raised his voice to you. You used me. I kept you alive." The shout echoed off the walls. Lucien never shouted. The sound was wrong, like hearing a statue scream. "Every breath you've taken since birth is because I decided you were worth the trouble. So yes, I monitored you. Yes, I had plans. That's what keeping someone safe looks like in this world. It's not pretty. It's not fair. But it's survival." Seraphina's hands were shaking. "The trafficking, the girls in those files. You're going to tell me that was for my safety too?" Lucien went very still. "Those files are incomplete. You don't understand the context." "Then explain it." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." He turned away from her, shoulders rigid. Some things you're better off not knowing. Fuck that. The curse felt good in her mouth. Fuck your protection and fuck your secrets. I'm done being your puppet. Then what? Lucien spun back around. You walk out of here? Go where exactly? Adrian's partners want you dead. The FBI wants to question you about everything you knew and when you knew it. Elena Volkov wants to use you as bait to draw me out. And somewhere out there, Alexei Volkov is wondering why his arranged bride just helped put her husband in federal custody. Where are you going to run that I won't find you? Where are you going to hide that they won't look? He was right. She hated that he was right. So I'm just supposed to stay here? Trust you? Marry whoever you tell me to marry? I'm asking you to let me handle this? The way you handled Adrian? The way you handled Mom? The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Lucien's face went blank, completely empty of expression. Your mother's death was an accident. Was it? Seraphina pushed off the wall, sudden recklessness flooding through her. Because Elena's files say otherwise. They say Mom found out about the trafficking, that she threatened to go to the police, that she died 3 days later in a bathtub full of pills and vodka, even though she'd been sober for 2 years. Elena is lying. Prove it. I don't have to prove anything to you. Then I don't have to believe anything you say. They stared at each other across 3 feet of carpet that felt like a battlefield. Seraphina could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, could taste metal in her mouth like she'd been chewing batteries. Lucien was the first to look away. Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning when you're thinking clearly. I am thinking clearly. No. You're scared and angry and making decisions that will get you killed. He moved toward the door. Stay in this room tonight. Don't answer if anyone knocks. Don't open any more files. Just sleep. And if I don't? Lucien paused in the doorway. Then I'll have Marcus sedate you, for your own safety. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Seraphina heard the deadbolt slide home from the outside. She was locked in. She crossed to the door and tested it anyway. Solid, unmovable. She kicked it hard enough to hurt her foot through the designer heel. The door didn't even shudder. Her phone buzzed from the bed where she'd left it. Another message from the unknown number. He locked you in. I can get you out. Knock on the wall behind your headboard. 3 times. I'm in the next room. Seraphina looked in the wall, at the headboard that had been there since she was 16. She'd never questioned what room was on the other side. Never needed to. She knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed dully through the plaster. Nothing happened for 30 seconds. Then she heard movement on the other side. Furniture scraping. Something heavy being dragged across the floor. A section of the wall beside her bed swung inward. Not a door, a panel. Hidden so well she'd never noticed the seams. Behind it stood Elena Volkov, dressed in black jeans and a dark sweater, hair pulled back from her face. Servant passages, Elena said quietly. Your brother doesn't know about all of them. The original owner of this house was paranoid, built escape routes into every room. She gestured to the dark space behind her. Coming? Seraphina didn't move. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only person in this house telling you the truth. You want revenge for your brother. Yes. Elena's face hardened. But not at your expense. Lucien Vale killed Dimitri, put 2 bullets in his head and left him to bleed out on a warehouse floor. But you didn't do that. You're not responsible for your brother's crimes. Then what do you want from me? I want you to see who he really is, what he's built, the empire of blood and misery that he's been constructing while telling you it was all to keep you safe. Elena's voice dropped. And then I want you to help me burn it to the ground. Seraphina looked back at her locked door, at the laptop full of damning evidence, at the life she'd thought she was escaping that had just swallowed her whole again. Show me, she said. Elena smiled. Get your shoes, leave your phone. Anything with GPS stays here. Seraphina kicked off her heels and pulled on the sneakers she'd kept in her closet since high school. She left her phone on the bed, face up, like she'd just fallen asleep without thinking. If anyone checked, it would look like she was still here. The servant passage was narrow and dark. Elena produced a small flashlight that cast a weak circle of light on walls that hadn't been painted in decades. Cobwebs hung thick in corners. The air smelled like dust and old wood. They moved in silence. Elena navigating turns and stairways with practiced ease. Down one level, Then another, deeper into the guts of the house until Seraphina lost track of where they were. Finally, Elena stopped at a door. She pressed her ear against it, listening, then slowly turned the handle and pushed it open. They emerged in the wine cellar. Racks of expensive bottles stretched in neat rows toward a vaulted brick ceiling. But Elena wasn't interested in the wine. She crossed to the far wall and felt along the mortar between bricks until something clicked. Another hidden door. This one led to stairs going down. "I thought this was the basement," Seraphina whispered. "This is the basement people know about." Elena started descending. "There's another level. Lucian's private space, where he keeps the things he doesn't want anyone to see." The stairs went down far longer than seemed possible. Seraphina counted steps until she lost track somewhere past 60. The temperature dropped with each level. By the time they reached the bottom, she could see her breath. The space that opened before them looked like something from a nightmare. A bunker. Not improvised, professionally built, reinforced concrete walls, industrial lighting, air filtration systems humming in the background. But that wasn't what made Seraphina's stomach clench. The room was divided into sections. In one corner, a communications hub with enough electronic equipment to run a small military operation. Monitors displayed security feeds from what looked like dozens of locations. Maps covered one wall, marked with pins and routes in red ink. In another corner, weapons. Not a gun safe, an armory. Rifles, handguns, ammunition, tactical gear arranged with military precision. But the center of the room was what Elena led her to. A desk. And on that desk, file boxes. Dozens of them, each labeled with years going back 3 decades. "Everything's in here," Elena said. "Every crime, every murder, every dollar of dirty money. Your brother documents everything. I think he's so convinced of his own invincibility that he keeps records like he's writing history." Seraphina opened the nearest box. Manila folders stuffed with papers, photographs, USB drives. The first folder she pulled showed surveillance photos of a man she didn't recognize. Attached notes in Lucian's handwriting: "Target acquired. Eliminating Thursday. Make it look like OD." The next folder was worse. A woman this time. Younger. Details about her routine, her family, her weaknesses. Final note. Leverage successful. Subject recruited. Dispose of brother as insurance. Seraphina's hands trembled as she opened folder after folder, each one a life destroyed, a person manipulated, eliminated, or broken, all in Lucian's precise handwriting. "He's a monster," she breathed. "Yes." Elena stood beside her, arms crossed. "But a smart one. He's built something massive, trafficking networks, drug routes, weapon pipelines. He's got politicians on payroll from Atlanta to D.C., judges, police chiefs, federal agents. The whole system's compromised." "How did you find this place?" "I've been searching for months, since Dmitri died." Elena's jaw tightened. "I got myself invited into this house as a guest, played the grieving sister looking for peace. Lucien thought I'd make a good wife for his new Volkov alliance. He has no idea I've been mapping every inch of his operation while he's been parading me around like a trophy." Seraphina turned to look at her. "You're FBI." Elena's smile was sharp. "Was. They kicked me out for going too deep into my brother's murder. Said I was compromised, emotionally invested, couldn't be objective." She laughed bitterly. "They were right. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong about Lucien. So what's your plan? Get me to testify against him?" "No. Testimony can be discredited. Witnesses can be killed. I need something permanent." Elena pulled out her phone, different from the one she'd left upstairs, Seraphina noticed. "I need you to help me steal these files, all of them, and I need you to hand them directly to someone Lucien can't touch." "Who?" "Marcus Webb, DOJ prosecutor. He's the only one who survived long enough to make a case this big stick. Lucy tried to kill him 3 times, failed each time. Webb's obsessed with taking down the Vale Empire. He'll use these files to burn everything." Seraphina looked at the boxes. There had to be 30 or 40 of them, years of evidence. "How do we get them out?" "Carefully, one box at a time. I've been copying files when I can, but there's too much. We need the physical evidence." Elena checked her phone. "Guards change shift in 20 minutes. That's when we move." "Move where?" "There's a service exit on the east side of the property, beyond the tree line. I've got a car waiting there. We load the boxes, drive to Webb's safe house, and let the DOJ do the rest. It sounded insane. Impossible. They'd be caught before they made it halfway. But staying in this house, under Lucien's control, waiting to be married off or disposed of when she stopped being useful, that was impossible too. Okay, Seraphina said. Let's do it. They worked quickly. Elena had clearly been planning this for a while. She'd hidden duffel bags behind the weapons rack, large enough to carry multiple file boxes. They started loading them, moving as quietly as possible despite the weight. The monitors in the corner showed various security feeds. Seraphina watched them nervously as they worked, expecting at any moment to see guards rushing toward the house. Don't worry about the cameras, Elena said. I've been looping the feeds. As far as the security room knows, everything's quiet. How do you know how to do all this? Dmitri taught me. Elena's voice went soft. He said every Volkov needed to know how to survive if the Empire fell, how to disappear, how to fight back. She zipped up another duffel bag. Guess he knew something I didn't. They had 6 bags loaded when Seraphina heard it. Footsteps. Above them. On the stairs. Elena heard it too. She froze, then swore under her breath. Shit, someone's coming! I thought you said the feeds were looped. They are, but if someone's doing a physical patrol... The door at the top of the stairs opened. Seraphina's heart stopped. They were caught. There was nowhere to hide, no way to explain what they were doing down here with bags full of stolen evidence. But it wasn't a guard who came down the stairs. It was Vivian Cross. Adrian's mistress stood at the bottom of the steps in designer clothes that looked too expensive for an assistant's salary, holding a gun that looked very comfortable in her hand. She smiled when she saw them. Well, Vivian said, this is interesting. Seraphina's mind raced. What are you doing here? Working. Vivian descended the last few steps. I've been on Lucien's payroll for 3 years. Your husband was my assignment. Keep him happy, keep him distracted. Make sure he didn't notice his business partner was documenting everything he did. The words hit like a fist. You were spying on Adrian, for Lucien, and on you. Vivian's smile widened. Every conversation you had, every private moment, every time you cried in the bathroom thinking you were alone, I reported it all. Lucien wanted to know if you'd break or if you'd become useful. Elena had gone very still beside Seraphina. Her hand was moving slowly toward the small of her back where Seraphina could now see the outline of a weapon under her sweater. So what now? Seraphina asked, trying to keep Vivian's attention. You shoot us? God, no. I'm not a killer. I'm reconnaissance. Vivian pulled out her phone. But Lucien will want to know about this immediately. Don't! Seraphina took a step forward. Please, just give us 10 minutes. Just let us get out of here. Why would I do that? Because you're not evil. You were just doing a job, right? Adrian was a target. I was a target. But Elena didn't do anything to you. She doesn't deserve to die for trying to avenge her brother. Vivian's finger hovered over her phone screen. For a moment, Seraphina thought she might actually listen. Then Vivian shook her head. Sorry, but Lucien pays really well. And I've seen what happens to people who disappoint him. She started to dial. Elena's gun came out so fast, Seraphina barely saw the movement. One moment, Elena's hands were empty. The next, a pistol was pointed directly at Vivian's head. Put the phone down, Elena said quietly. Vivian's eyes went wide. Her own gun started to rise. Don't, Elena's voice never wavered. I don't want to kill you, but I will. Put both down, phone and gun, now. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Vivian slowly bent and placed both items on the floor. She straightened with her hands raised, face pale. Smart choice, Elena said. She moved forward and kicked the gun and phone away. Sarah, grab those and the rest of the bags. We're leaving now. Seraphina's hand shook as she picked up Vivian's phone and gun. The weapon felt heavy and wrong. She'd never held one before. Never wanted to. You won't make it out, Vivian said. There are cameras everywhere, guards on every exit. Lucien will know before you reach the property line. Let me worry about that. Elena gestured with her gun. You're coming with us. Insurance. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then I shoot you here and we go anyway. Your choice. Vivian's throat worked as she swallowed. He'll kill me. When he finds out I let you escape. Then you better hope we succeed, Elena said. Because if the DOJ takes Lucien down, you'll have bigger problems than disappointing your employer. You'll be an accessory to about 50 felonies. They moved toward the stairs with Vivian in front, Elena's gun pressed to her back. Seraphina carried 2 of the duffel bags, the weight making her shoulders scream. Behind them, the monitors continued their silent vigil, security feeds showing a house that had no idea it was about to bleed. Halfway up the stairs, Seraphina heard voices above, men talking, getting louder. Elena pressed Vivian against the wall and held a finger to her lips. They all froze. Checked the perimeter twice. Everything's clear. A guard's voice, bored and routine. Boss wants an extra patrol tonight. Said he's got a bad feeling. Another guard. Younger, more nervous. Boss always has a bad feeling. Makes us walk this place like we're waiting for an invasion. The voices faded. Footsteps moving away. Elena waited another 30 seconds before continuing up. They emerged into the wine cellar. Still empty, but for how long? They moved through the servant passages, retracing their route. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made Seraphina's heart slam against her ribs. The duffel bags banged against walls despite her best efforts to stay quiet. Finally, they reached the panel that led back to the bedroom wing. Elena eased it open and checked the hallway. Clear. But they couldn't go out the front. Too many cameras, too many guards. The east exit, Elena whispered. Service entrance past the kitchen, used for deliveries, fewer cameras. They moved through hallways Seraphina barely remembered. Past rooms she hadn't entered in a decade. The house felt massive in the dark, like it had grown while she was gone, spawning new corridors and shadows. The kitchen was industrial-sized and mercifully empty. They crept past stainless steel counters and restaurant-grade appliances toward a door at the back, emergency exit sign glowing faintly above it. Elena reached for the handle. The door exploded inward. Guards poured through, 4 of them, armed, moving with military precision. Before Seraphina could even process what was happening, Elena was shoved to the ground, her gun skittering across tile. More guards behind them. Seraphina spun and saw them blocking the way they'd come, trapped. And then Lucien walked in. He looked at the scene with cold assessment. His sister holding stolen evidence. His guest holding a gun until 30 seconds ago. His employee standing with her hands raised. "Vivian," he said calmly, "you can put your hands down." Vivian lowered her arms slowly. "I tried to stop them." "I know. I've been watching." Lucien gestured to a guard who handed him a tablet. He turned it so Seraphina could see the screen. Security footage. But not the looped feeds Elena had thought she was clever enough to fake. Real footage. Showing everything. Every moment from the basement to here. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice someone mapping my security system?" Lucien asked Elena. "I knew what you were doing from day one. I let you continue because I wanted to see how far you'd go." Elena's face was pressed to the tile. Blood ran from her nose where she'd been slammed down, but her eyes burned with hate. "You're going to prison. Eventually someone will—" "No one will do anything," Lucien cut her off, "because everyone who matters is either working for me or afraid of me. And now I have proof that you broke into my home, stole my property, and attempted to kidnap one of my employees." He nodded to Vivian. "Self-defense. Clean narrative. He was going to kill Elena right here. Right now." "Stop." The word came out of Seraphina's mouth before she could think. "Please, don't do this." Lucien finally looked at her. Really looked at her. And what she saw in his eyes made her want to scream. Disappointment. "I gave you every chance," he said quietly. "Every opportunity to trust me. To let me protect you. And you chose to believe her instead. Because she was telling the truth. Was she?" Lucien set down the tablet. "Elena Volkov has been feeding you a carefully constructed story designed to turn you against me. Her brother wasn't innocent. He was trafficking girls younger than 15. Dmitry Volkov was a monster, and I killed him because he deserved to die. Every document in that basement is evidence of me stopping people like him." "That's not—" Seraphina started. "You don't know what you saw," Lucien continued. "You looked at files without context, names without stories. You saw weapons and assumed guilt, but you never asked me. You never gave me the chance to explain. Would you have told me the truth? I've never lied to you." His voice dropped. "Everything I've done has been to keep you safe and alive. And this is how you repay me. By stealing from me, by trying to destroy everything I've built. Guards hauled Elena to her feet. She struggled, but they held her easily, arms wrenched behind her back. What are you going to do to her? Seraphina asked. What needs to be done? Lucien nodded to his men. Take her to the South Building. I'll deal with her after I've handled this situation. The South Building. Seraphina knew what that meant. She'd heard whispers growing up, the place where problems were solved, where people went in and didn't come out. No. She moved toward Elena before she could think. You can't. A guard caught her arm, held her back easily despite her struggles. Elena looked at her one last time. Don't let him win, she said. Don't let him make you think this is normal. This is... One of the guards hit her, hard enough that Elena's head snapped back, hard enough that she went limp in their grip. They dragged her out through the service door, into the darkness. Seraphina watched them go, something breaking inside her chest that felt permanent. Final. Lucien touched her shoulder. She flinched away from him. I know you're scared, he said. I know you're confused, but this will all make sense eventually. I promise. You're going to kill her. I'm going to protect this family. There's a difference. No. Seraphina pulled free from the guard holding her. There's no difference. You're a murderer. You've always been a murderer. And I was stupid enough to think you were something else. Lucien's expression went cold. Go to your room. We'll discuss this in the morning when you've calmed down. I'm not going back to that room. You don't have a choice. Then you'll have to drag me. Seraphina's voice cracked. You'll have to put me in handcuffs and lock me up like a prisoner, because I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not playing along with your sick game where you're the hero and everyone else is collateral damage. For a long moment, Lucien just looked at her. Then he nodded to the guards. They grabbed her arms, started pulling her toward the hallway. Seraphina fought, kicked and screamed and clawed. But they were trained professionals, and she was just a woman in sneakers who hadn't fought back against anything in a decade. They dragged her up the stairs. Down the hallway, back to her childhood bedroom with its locked door and glow-in-the-dark stars. They threw her inside and slammed the door. She heard the lock slide home, heard footsteps walking away. Seraphina pressed her face to the carpet and screamed until her throat was raw. When the screaming stopped, she lay there in the dark and listened to the house settle around her. Somewhere below, in a building she'd never seen, Elena Volkov was probably dying, or already dead, and Seraphina had helped lead her there. Her phone was still on the bed where she'd left it. She picked it up with shaking hands and opened the contacts. She had one chance. One person who might help, who might actually give a shit that her brother was a monster. She called the number she'd memorized but never used, the one Adrian had given her years ago for emergencies, his lawyer, someone who worked outside Lucien's sphere of influence. The phone rang 4 times. Then a sleepy voice answered. This is Marcus Webb, not Adrian's lawyer, the DOJ prosecutor, the one Elena had mentioned. Seraphina's breath caught. How did you get this number? Adrian gave it to me 6 months ago, said his wife might need help someday, that if she called, I should listen. Webb sounded more awake now. Who is this? Seraphina Vale. Her voice came out hoarse from screaming. And I want to make a deal. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm listening. My brother killed Elena Volkov tonight. Or he's about to. He's got a basement full of evidence proving he's been running criminal operations for decades. And I can get it for you. She was crying now, hot tears running down her face. But you have to promise me something. What? That when you arrest him, you make sure he never gets out, that he rots in prison until he dies. Because if he walks, he'll kill me, and everyone else who tried to stop him. Webb was quiet for a moment. Where are you right now? Locked in a bedroom, in his compound. He's got guards everywhere. Can you get out? I don't know, maybe, if I'm smart about it. Then here's what you're going to do. Webb's voice shifted into something hard and focused. You're going to wait until exactly 4 a.m. That's when I'll have tactical teams ready to move. And when they breach the property, you're going to get to that basement and you're going to protect those files with your life. Can you do that? Seraphina looked at the clock, 2:17 a.m., less than 2 hours. Yes, she said. Good. Keep this line open. And Seraphina? Webb's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry. About your brother. About all of this. Don't be sorry. She wiped her eyes. Just make sure he pays. She ended the call and sat in the dark, waiting for 4 a.m. and the sound of sirens that would either save her life or end it. Outside her window, she could see lights moving in the distance. The South Building, where Elena Volkov was learning what happened to people who crossed Lucian Vale. Seraphina closed her eyes and made herself a promise. If she survived this, she would never trust another person as long as she lived, because every person she'd ever trusted had either betrayed her or died. And she was done losing. The clock on Seraphina's nightstand glowed 3:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the raid. 13 minutes until federal agents would storm the compound and either save her or get her killed in the crossfire. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone clutched in one hand, listening to the house breathe around her. No footsteps in the hallway, no voices. Just the ancient settling of wood and the distant hum of security systems. Her other hand held Vivian's gun. She'd hidden it in her waistband before the guards threw her back in here. They'd been sloppy, angry, focused on restraining her rather than searching her. The weapon pressed cold against her spine now, a reminder that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. 3:49. Seraphina stood and moved to the window. The South Building was dark now. No more lights, no more movement. Whatever had happened to Elena was over. She swallowed the grief that tried to claw up her throat. No time for that. Grief was a luxury for people who survived. 3:52. Her phone buzzed, text from Webb. Teams in position, stand by. She texted back with shaking thumbs. Ready. The lie felt appropriate. She wasn't ready, would never be ready. But ready or not, in 8 minutes, her brother's empire was going to explode. She moved to the door and pressed her ear against it. Still nothing. The guards had probably rotated to other parts of the house. Lucien wouldn't waste manpower watching a locked door when he had perimeters to secure. 3:56. Seraphina pulled Vivian's gun from her waistband and checked it the way she'd seen people do in movies. Magazine full, safety off, round in the chamber. She had no idea if she could actually pull the trigger, but holding it made her feel slightly less helpless. 3:59. She counted her heartbeats, felt them slam against her ribs like fists trying to escape. Her palms were sweating. She wiped them on her jeans one at a time, keeping the gun pointed at the floor. 4 a.m. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The house stayed silent and dark, and Seraphina thought maybe Webb had lied. Maybe this was all a setup. Maybe she'd just signed her own death warrant by trusting another person. Then the night detonated. Sirens screamed from every direction. Helicopter rotors chewed the air overhead. Searchlights blazed across the ground so bright they turned night into day. And beneath it all, amplified voices shouting commands. FBI! Federal agents! Everyone on the ground now! The house erupted into chaos. Footsteps thundered past her door. Men shouting, weapons being chambered. Somewhere downstairs, glass shattered and wood splintered as doors were breached. Seraphina ran to her door and kicked it hard. Once, twice. The lock held, but the frame was old, decorative, never meant to withstand actual force. The third kick split wood and sent the door swinging open. The hallway was empty, but she could hear combat happening below. Gunfire. Short, controlled bursts that echoed through the mansion like thunder. More shouting. Someone screaming in pain. She ran toward the servant passages, the route Elena had shown her. Her sneakers squeaked on hardwood as she navigated corridors by memory and terror. The gun felt heavier with every step. Behind her, the sounds of invasion grew louder. Federal agents were flooding the house room by room. She heard them announcing themselves, heard furniture being overturned, heard Lucian's guards trying to mount some kind of defense. The wine cellar door was unlocked. She burst through it and descended the stairs 3 at a time, nearly falling twice. The hidden door to the sub-basement stood open. Someone had already been here. The bunker lights were on when she reached the bottom. And Marcus Webb stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by Lucien's file boxes, wearing a bulletproof vest with FBI stenciled across the chest. Seraphina lowered her gun slightly. "You're already here." Had to secure the evidence before anyone could destroy it. Webb looked up from the documents he was photographing. He was older than she'd imagined from his voice. Mid-50s, maybe? Gray at the temples. Tired eyes that had seen too much. "You okay?" "Elena Volkov." "I know. We found her." Webb's expression went hard. She's alive. Barely. Your brother's men beat her pretty badly, but she'll survive. Relief hit Seraphina so hard she nearly dropped the gun. She's alive. For now, depends on whether she makes it to the hospital. Webb went back to photographing documents. Help me load these. We need to move fast. Your brother's going to realize what's happening, and then things are going to get worse. Seraphina set down her gun and started grabbing file boxes. The duffel bags Elena had prepared were still here, shoved in a corner. They worked quickly, loading evidence that represented decades of crimes. Upstairs, the gunfire had stopped. The shouting continued, but it sounded more controlled now. Federal agents establishing dominance, securing rooms. How long until they breach down here? Seraphina asked. They won't. This level isn't on any blueprints. I only knew about it because Elena managed to get a message out before tonight. Webb sealed another box. We've got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices this door and comes investigating. They were loading the 8th box when Seraphina heard footsteps on the stairs. Not federal agents. She knew those footsteps, had known them her entire life. Lucien appeared at the bottom of the stairs like a ghost materializing from smoke. He wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. His shirt was torn. Blood spattered across one sleeve. Not his blood, she thought. His face was perfectly calm. He looked at Seraphina, at Webb, at the boxes of evidence being systematically stolen from his private sanctum. Hello, Marcus, Lucien said quietly. I was wondering when you'd make your move. Webb's hand went to his sidearm, but Lucien raised his own gun faster. Don't. I'm really not in the mood. They faced each other across 10 feet of concrete. Seraphina stood frozen between them, her own weapon on the floor 3 feet away where she'd set it down. Your house is full of federal agents, Webb said. You're done, Vale. Surrender, and maybe you survive the night. Am I done? Lucien's smile was cold. Funny, because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one holding a gun on someone who matters. He shifted his aim slightly, pointing at Webb's head instead of his chest. You're wearing a vest, smart, but it won't help with this angle. Lucien, please, Seraphina started. Be quiet, Sarah. He didn't look at her. This doesn't concern you anymore. It concerns her more than anyone. Webb's voice stayed level despite the gun pointed at his skull. She's the one who called me. She's the witness who's going to put you away forever. No. Lucien's finger tightened on the trigger. She's the sister who betrayed me, and she's going to watch what happens to people who make that choice. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Seraphina screamed and dove for her own gun, but when she looked up, Webb was still standing, and Lucien was lowering his weapon with a look of profound disgust. Can't do it, he muttered. 30 years of killing, and I can't shoot the one person I should. He was looking at Seraphina when he said it. Webb moved fast, pulling his weapon and closing the distance. On the ground, now! Lucien didn't resist. He let Webb kick his gun away, let himself be shoved face first into concrete, let the handcuffs close around his wrists. Through it all, he kept his eyes on Seraphina. You really think this changes anything? Lucien asked. You think the FBI is going to protect you after this? You think you'll be safe? Shut up. Webb hauled him to his feet. You have the right to remain silent. I don't need my rights read to me. I know them better than you do. Lucien finally looked away from Seraphina. But she should know something before you parade me out of here in handcuffs. I said shut up. Your precious witness isn't as innocent as she looks. Lucien's voice cut through the bunker like a blade. Sarah, tell Marcus what you did 6 months ago. Tell him about the man in the parking garage. Seraphina's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Remember? You came to me crying. Said Adrian's business partner had cornered you, threatened you, put his hands on you. Lucien's smile was terrible. You begged me to make him go away, and I did. I killed him for you, put 2 bullets in his head and dumped him in the Chattahoochee. That's not... The word stuck in her throat, because it was true. She had gone to Lucien 6 months ago. After Richard Morrison, one of Adrian's associates, had gotten drunk at a benefit and followed her to her car, had pressed her against the door and put his hand up her dress and whispered what he wanted to do to her. She'd fought him off and driven home shaking so hard she'd nearly crashed twice. And she'd called Lucien Because despite everything, despite a decade of distance, he was still the first person she thought of when she was scared. He told her not to worry, that he'd handle it. 3 days later, Richard Morrison's body was found in the river with 2 bullets in the back of his head. "You're an accessory," Lucian said softly. "Conspiracy to commit murder. You ordered the hit, Sarah. I just pulled the trigger." Webb was looking at her now, reassessing. "Is that true?" "I didn't order anything." Seraphina's voice came out strangled. "I just told him what happened. I didn't know." "Yes, you did." Lucien's eyes bored into hers. "You knew exactly what would happen when you told me. You knew what I do to people who hurt my family. You wanted Morrison dead, and you used me as the weapon." "No. There's a recording," Lucian continued, "of our phone conversation. I keep recordings of everything, and in it, you can hear yourself describing Morrison's car, his schedule, where he'd be vulnerable." He turned to Webb. "Your star witness is a murderer, Marcus, just like me. The only difference is she's better at lying to herself about it." Seraphina couldn't breathe. Her vision tunneled until all she could see was Lucien's face, calm and cruel and absolutely certain. He was right. She'd known. Maybe not consciously, but some part of her had known that telling Lucien about Morrison was the same as signing a death warrant. And she'd done it anyway because she was angry and scared and wanted someone to pay for making her feel helpless. "The recordings in box 17, Lucien said. "Red USB drive, along with several other recordings that prove my sweet innocent sister has been complicit in my operations for a lot longer than she wants to admit." Webb hesitated, then he pulled box 17 open and found the drive. "Don't—" Seraphina reached for him, but he stepped back. "I need to hear it," Webb said. "If you're lying, Vale, it'll just add more charges. But if you're telling the truth—" "I'm always telling the truth," Lucian smiled. "That's what makes it hurt so much." Webb plugged the drive into his phone and played the audio file. Seraphina's voice filled the bunker. Younger, more frightened, describing Richard Morrison in detail. His car, his routine, his office. And then at the end, "Make him stop, Lucien, please. I can't feel safe if he's still out there." The recording ended. Webb looked at her for a long moment. "Jesus Christ. It's not what it sounds like," Seraphina started. "It's exactly what it sounds like." Webb's face had gone hard. "You arranged a murder." "I didn't arrange anything. I was terrified. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have called the police, filed a report, done literally anything except ask your crime lord brother to kill someone for you." "The police wouldn't have done shit," Seraphina's voice cracked. "Morrison was rich, connected. He would have gotten away with it like he got away with everything else. At least with Lucien. At least with Lucien, you got to be the judge, jury, and executioner." Webb shook his head. "You're not a witness. You're an accomplice." The word hit like a physical blow. Accomplice. Not victim. Not hero. Accomplice. Everything she'd done tonight, calling Webb, arranging the raid, stealing evidence, all of it was built on the lie that she was different from Lucien, that she was better, that she was trying to escape a world she'd never been part of. But she'd always been part of it. She'd just been better at pretending. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, more FBI agents drawn by the gunshot. They flooded into the bunker with weapons raised, shouting commands, assessing threats. Webb held up his badge. "Secure the suspect, and her." "Her?" One of the agents looked confused. "Seraphina Vale is a person of interest in a homicide investigation. Take her into custody, nonviolent if possible." Seraphina backed away. "Wait. No, I helped you. I called you." "You helped yourself," Webb said. "You wanted your brother taken down because he was getting ready to marry you off. This was never about justice. It was about escape." An agent moved toward her. She looked at Lucien, desperate for some kind of defense or denial or anything that would prove Webb wrong. But Lucien just smiled. "Welcome to the family business, little sister. Turns out you were always one of us." The agent grabbed her arm. She didn't fight. What was the point? Everything Webb said was true. She had called Lucien about Morrison knowing what would happen, had stayed silent about it afterward, had accepted his protection while telling herself she wasn't complicit in his crimes. The handcuffs closed around her wrists. They led her up the stairs behind Lucien, both of them in matching silver bracelets. Federal agents lined the hallway, securing rooms and cataloging evidence. The beautiful mansion looked like a war zone, furniture overturned, paintings fallen from walls, blood on the expensive carpet. Outside, the grounds were chaos. More agents, more vehicles, media helicopters circling overhead despite the 4 a.m. darkness. Spotlights turned everything harsh and overexposed. They separated Seraphina and Lucien at the transport vehicles. She watched them load her brother into an armored FBI van. He looked back at her once before they closed the doors. "You did good, Sarah," he called out. "You'll beat this. You're smarter than they think." Then he was gone. They put Seraphina in a different vehicle, alone in the back cage with her hands cuffed behind her. Through the reinforced window, she could see agents carrying boxes of evidence from the house. Her life and her brother's life reduced to file folders and USB drives. An agent she didn't recognize climbed into the driver's seat. "We're taking you to federal holding for processing. You'll have a chance to call a lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer?" "Then they'll assign you a public defender." The vehicle started moving. Seraphina watched the Vale estate disappear behind them, getting smaller and smaller until it was just another set of lights in the pre-dawn darkness. She'd destroyed everything. Her marriage, her family, her freedom. And for what? She was still trapped, still powerless, still at the mercy of men who saw her as useful or threatening or disposable. The holding facility was a gray concrete building that looked like every police station in every crime drama she'd ever seen. They processed her like cargo, fingerprints, photographs, possessions cataloged and confiscated. The guards were professional and cold, treating her exactly the same as they'd treat any other suspect. Finally, they locked her in a cell by herself. 6 by 8 feet. Concrete walls, metal toilet, thin mattress on a platform bolted to the floor. Seraphina sat on the mattress and stared at the wall. She'd been sitting there for what felt like hours when the door opened and Marcus Webb stepped inside. He looked tired, more tired than before. Like the weight of everything he'd seen tonight had finally caught up with him. "I need to ask you some questions," he said. "Don't I get a lawyer?" "You can request one, but then this conversation ends and I can't help you anymore." He pulled out a small recording device. "So let me be very clear about your situation. You're facing conspiracy to commit murder, accessory after the fact, obstruction of justice. You're looking at 20 years minimum." 20 years. The number felt abstract, impossible. "However," Webb continued, "I can make most of that go away if you cooperate fully. Tell me everything about your brother's operations, everyone he works with, every crime you witnessed or heard about. You do that, and I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you were instrumental in taking down the Vale Empire." "Instrumental?" Seraphina laughed bitterly. "Is that what I am? You're a witness who made some bad decisions out of fear. The court can be sympathetic to that, but only if you give me everything." She looked up at him, at this man who represented justice and righteousness and all the things she'd thought she wanted. "What if I don't remember everything?" "Then you try, and you keep trying until you do remember." Webb leaned against the wall. "I've been chasing your brother for 15 years. He's killed dozens of people, ruined hundreds of lives, poisoned entire communities with drugs and violence, and he's gotten away with it because people like you stayed quiet." "I didn't know." "Yes, you did. You knew exactly what he was. You just didn't want to face it because facing it meant admitting you benefited from his crimes. The expensive schools, the designer clothes, the protection, all of it paid for in blood." The words hit like accusations because that's what they were. Seraphina wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain that she'd tried to escape, but she hadn't tried very hard. She'd married Adrian and moved to a mansion and played society wife while Lucien continued building his empire. She'd taken his calls, accepted his help, let him kill for her when she was scared. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll tell you everything." Webb nodded and pressed record on his device. For the next 3 hours, Seraphina talked. She told him about growing up in the Vale house, about the meetings she'd overheard, the conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the men who came to visit Lucien in the middle of the night, the times she'd seen blood on his clothes or guns in his car or briefcases full of cash that disappeared by morning. She told him about her mother's death, about the suspicions she'd buried because acknowledging them meant acknowledging her brother was capable of murdering his own family. She told him about Adrian, about how Lucien had arranged the introduction, how he'd encouraged the relationship, how he'd given his blessing at the wedding while secretly documenting Adrian's crimes. She told him everything she could remember and some things she wasn't sure were memories or assumptions or just guesses based on years of living adjacent to violence. When she finished, Webb turned off the recorder and rubbed his eyes. Jesus, he really did have you trapped from the beginning. Does it matter? I'm still going to prison. Probably not. Webb stood. With this testimony, I can offer you immunity on the Morrison murder. You'll have to plead guilty to some lesser charges, maybe serve 6 months. But after that, you're free. Free. The word tasted like ash. Where am I supposed to go? Everyone knows my face now. Everyone knows I'm Lucian Vale's sister. His enemies will want revenge. His allies will want to silence me. I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. We can put you in witness protection. New identity, new city. You'd have to cut ties with everyone from your old life, but you'd be safe. Safe. Another word that had lost all meaning. What about Elena? Seraphina asked. Is she really alive? She's in ICU, critical but stable. Your brother's men did a number on her, but she's strong. Webb moved toward the door. She asked about you, wanted to know if you made it out. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her... Seraphina's voice cracked. Tell her she was right about everything. Webb nodded. Get some rest. We'll move you to a safe house tomorrow while we work out the details of your plea agreement. He left. The door locked behind him. Seraphina lay back on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere in the building she could hear voices, footsteps, the ordinary sounds of law enforcement processing the worst night of several people's lives. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine the future. Witness protection. A new name. A new city. A new life scrubbed clean of every connection to her past. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like erasure. Her phone was gone, confiscated during processing. But she didn't need it. She'd memorized the important numbers years ago, just in case. When the guards changed shift at 6 a.m., Seraphina stood and pressed her face to the small window in her cell door. I need to make a phone call. I'm entitled to one. The guard looked annoyed but pulled out a phone. Who are you calling? She gave him the number, watched him dial, took the phone when he handed it through the slot. It rang twice before someone answered. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Law Offices of Catherine Price. I need to speak to Catherine. Tell her it's Seraphina Vale. Miss Price doesn't take unscheduled calls. Tell her Lucien's been arrested. Tell her I have information about the Volkov merger. Tell her I'm in federal custody and I need representation immediately. Silence, then. Hold, please. 30 seconds later, a new voice came on the line. Older, sharper. Seraphina, I was wondering when you'd call. Catherine Price, Lucian's personal attorney for the past decade, the woman who'd kept him out of prison despite numerous investigations, the best criminal defense lawyer on the East Coast. I need your help, Seraphina said. Of course you do. You just betrayed your brother and handed federal prosecutors enough evidence to put him away for life. Now you're realizing that Marcus Webb doesn't actually care about protecting you. He cares about his conviction rate. Catherine's voice was almost amused. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to refuse to cooperate further until I arrive. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And for God's sake, don't take any plea deals. Webb said he'd give me immunity. Webb is lying, or at best he's promising things he can't deliver. The prosecutors will chew you up and throw away what's left, but I can actually get you out of this. A pause. For a price. What price? You recant your testimony, all of it. You tell the court you were coerced by Elena Volkov, that she manipulated you into calling the FBI, that everything you said about Lucian was based on lies she fed you. Seraphina's grip tightened on the phone. You want me to perjure myself. I want you to survive. The evidence in those boxes? Most of it's inadmissible. Chain of custody issues. Illegal search and seizure. By the time I'm done, the prosecution's case will be Swiss cheese, but only if you stop helping them. Lucien will still go to prison. They have Elena's testimony. Elena's testimony is worthless. She's a known criminal with an obvious vendetta. No jury will trust her. But you? Catherine's voice softened slightly. You're the sympathetic sister. The woman who was manipulated and abused. The victim. Juries love victims. I'm not a victim. Yes, you are. You just don't want to admit it because admitting it means accepting that you've wasted 10 years of your life. Catherine paused. I'll be at the holding facility in 2 hours. Don't talk to anyone until I get there. Understood? Seraphina looked at the concrete walls, at the locked door, at the future that was rapidly narrowing to two choices: betray Lucien completely and spend the rest of her life hiding, or protect him one more time and maybe, claw back some kind of normal existence. Understood, she whispered. She handed the phone back to the guard. 2 hours. She had 2 hours to decide who she wanted to be. The woman who finally stood up to her brother and accepted the consequences, or the woman who'd been protecting him all along without even realizing it. Seraphina sat back down on the mattress and waited for Catherine Price to arrive and tell her exactly how to lie convincingly enough to destroy everything Marcus Webb had built. Because in the end, that's what survival looked like for people like her. Not heroism, not redemption. Just an endless series of choices between bad and worse, until you couldn't remember which one you'd started with or why it had ever mattered. Catherine Price arrived exactly 2 hours later wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars and carrying a briefcase that looked like it had survived several wars. She was in her late 50s with silver hair cut sharp as a blade and eyes that missed nothing. The guard led her into Seraphina's cell and locked the door behind her. You look terrible, Catherine said by way of greeting. She set her briefcase on the mattress and pulled out a yellow legal pad. When's the last time you slept? I don't know. Yesterday? 2 days ago? Seraphina's voice came out hoarse. Does it matter? It matters because you need to look sympathetic in court. Exhausted and terrified plays well with juries. Catherine clicked her pen. Now, tell me everything you told Marcus Webb. Seraphina recounted the 3-hour confession, every detail she'd given about Lucien's operations, every crime she'd witnessed or suspected, every piece of testimony that could be used to put her brother away for life. Catherine listened without interrupting, taking notes in shorthand that looked more like code than writing. When Seraphina finished, Catherine sat back and tapped her pen against her teeth. All right, here's the situation. Webb's going to try to use your testimony to build a RICO case against Lucien. Racketeering charges. They'll go after his assets, his associates, everyone who's ever worked with him. Your testimony is the foundation for all of it. I know. So we're going to destroy that foundation. Catherine flipped to a new page. You were coerced. Elena Volkov manipulated you. She fed you lies about your brother, used your trauma from Adrian's betrayal to make you vulnerable, and then arranged the FBI raid to eliminate Lucien so the Volkov family could take over his territory. That's not what happened. I don't care what happened. I care what we can prove didn't happen. Catherine's eyes were cold. The evidence in those boxes? Half of it's going to get thrown out. The raid was based on information from a compromised source. You, coerced by Elena. Any evidence gathered as a result is fruit of the poisonous tree. Inadmissible. What about the recordings? Lucien's voice ordering hits? Out of context. Edited, fabricated by Elena to frame your brother. She had months to manufacture evidence while she was living in his house. Catherine made another note. We'll bring in audio forensics experts. Create reasonable doubt about everything. Seraphina felt sick. You want me to lie under oath. I want you to tell a different version of the truth, one that doesn't end with you in prison and your brother's empire handed over to his enemies. Catherine leaned forward. Let me be very clear about what happens if you continue cooperating with Webb. You testify against Lucien. He goes to prison. And then what? Witness protection? New identity? You think that's going to save you? Webb said, Webb is naive. Your brother has reach that extends beyond prison walls. He has loyalists who would die for him. And they will find you. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year. But eventually someone will recognize you in a grocery store or coffee shop, and you'll disappear. Catherine's voice didn't waver. The only way you survive this is if Lucien stays free, because as long as he's out here, his enemies know that hurting you means war with him. The logic was twisted, but Seraphina couldn't find the flaw in it. Lucien was dangerous, but he was also the only person who'd ever actually protected her, even if that protection came with chains. What about Elena? Seraphina asked. She nearly died because of Lucien. Elena Volkov is a known criminal who broke into your brother's home and tried to steal evidence. Her injuries were sustained during her arrest, Federal agents can confirm there was resistance during the raid. Self-defense. Catherine shrugged. She'll be facing her own charges. Breaking and entering. Attempted theft. By the time we're done, her credibility will be destroyed. She was telling the truth. Truth is a luxury we can't afford right now. Catherine closed her legal pad. You have a choice to make, Seraphina. Stand by your testimony and watch everything burn, including yourself, or recant, protect your family, and maybe, just maybe, get your life back. My life? Seraphina laughed bitterly. What life? My husband's in federal prison. My brother's a monster. I'm locked in a cell. What exactly am I getting back? Freedom. The Vale estate once it's no longer under seizure. Your inheritance. Most importantly, you get to stop running. Catherine stood. I need your answer now. Webb's going to come back soon and try to finalize your plea deal. Once you sign that, there's no going back. Seraphina looked at her hands. They were shaking again. Had been shaking for hours now. She couldn't remember the last time they'd been steady. She thought about Elena lying in a hospital bed, about Marcus Webb believing she was finally doing the right thing, about the dozens of lives Lucien had destroyed that would never get justice if she protected him. And she thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, never sleeping soundly, never trusting anyone, always waiting for the bullet or the knife or the poison. Okay, she whispered. Tell me what to say. Catherine smiled. It was the kind of smile that preceded devastation. Good girl. Now here's exactly how this is going to work. For the next hour, Catherine coached her, practiced responses to questions Webb would ask, crafted a narrative that was just believable enough to create reasonable doubt. By the time they finished, Seraphina had a story that painted her as a victim instead of a witness. Elena had manipulated her, fed her lies, used her vulnerability to turn her against Lucien. Everything Seraphina had told the FBI was based on fabricated evidence and coercion. It was perfect, airtight, completely false. Catherine packed up her briefcase. I'll inform Webb that you're withdrawing your cooperation. He's going to be pissed, probably threaten you with obstruction charges. But those won't stick once I explain you were coerced by Elena. When do I get out? 48 hours, maybe less. I'll have you arraigned on the lesser charges, post bail, and get you released pending trial. Catherine moved toward the door. After that, you go back to the estate. Lucien will still be in custody, but his legal team will handle his defense. All you have to do is keep your mouth shut and stick to the story. The door opened. Catherine stepped out without looking back. Seraphina sat alone in the cell and felt the last piece of herself that believed in redemption quietly die. She'd made her choice. Survival over justice, family over truth. The same choice her mother had probably faced before the bathtub full of pills. Maybe that's what it meant to be a Vale. You drowned slowly in the same waters that kept you afloat. Marcus Webb arrived 20 minutes later. One look at his face told Seraphina that Catherine had already informed him of the situation. You're making a mistake, he said without preamble. A huge fucking mistake. I'm protecting myself. You're protecting a murderer. Webb slammed his hand against the wall. I had everything. Your testimony could have put him away for life, and you're just throwing it away because his lawyer scared you. She didn't scare me. She told me the truth. She told you lies designed to keep her client out of prison. Webb's voice was ragged with exhaustion and frustration. Lucien Vale has killed dozens of people. He's trafficked women and children. He's poisoned communities with drugs and destroyed families. And you're going to let him walk. He's my brother. He's a monster who's been using you your entire life. When are you going to see that? Seraphina stood, moved as close to the door as the small cell allowed. I saw it. I believed it. And then I realized something worse. I'm a monster too. I called you about Morrison knowing Lucien would kill him. I stayed quiet about crimes for 30 years. I'm not some innocent victim. I'm complicit in everything he's ever done. So make it right. Testify. And then what? Spend my life hiding, waiting for revenge? Or go to prison myself for Morrison's murder? She shook her head. I'm choosing survival. That's all any of us can do. Webb stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a folder and shoved it through the slot in the door. Before you commit to this path, look at these. Really look at them. Seraphina opened the folder. Photographs spilled out. Crime scene photos. Bodies. Young women. Teenagers. Some looked even younger. Each photo was labeled with a name, date, and location. "These are the girls your brother trafficked," Webb said quietly. 15 of them that we know about, probably more. They were taken from bus stations and shelters and broken homes, promised jobs or safety or a better life. Instead, they were sold to the highest bidder. Seraphina's hand shook as she looked through the images. Each face was a person, a life, a story that ended in violence and exploitation. "This one," Webb pointed to a photo of a girl who couldn't have been more than 14. Dark hair, terrified eyes. Her name was Rosa Martinez, taken from a shelter in Tampa, found dead in a motel room in Charlotte. Overdose. Except the medical examiner said it was forced. Someone held her down and injected her. "Stop." "This one, Jessica Chen, 16, disappeared from Seattle. Ended up in one of the houses your brother controls in Atlanta. She tried to escape. They broke both her legs." Webb's voice never wavered. "She's in a wheelchair now. Can't walk, can't work, can't live without help." I said stop. "Why? Because it makes you uncomfortable? Because it's easier to pretend these girls don't exist than to face what your brother actually is?" Webb pulled out more photos. Amber Rodriguez, Lily Thompson, Keisha Williams. I can keep going. I have boxes full of these. Lives destroyed, families shattered. Also, Lucian Vale could maintain his empire. Seraphina threw the folder at the door. Photos scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't been living with this guilt my entire life? Then do something about it." Webb's composure finally cracked. "Stop being a coward and do the right thing for once." "The right thing?" Seraphina laughed wildly. "There is no right thing. Every choice leads to more suffering. I testify, Lucian goes to prison, but his organization continues operating under new leadership. Girls still get trafficked. People still die. The only difference is I'm dead too. At least you die with a clean conscience. I don't have a conscience anymore. It died the same night I decided to destroy Adrian. Or maybe it died earlier. Maybe it's been dead since I was a child watching my brother build his empire and doing nothing to stop it." Webb gathered the scattered photos. Carefully. Respectfully. Like they were precious things instead of evidence of atrocity. "I'm going to give you one more chance. 24 hours. Look at these photos. Think about these girls. And then decide if protecting your brother is really worth it." He left the photos on the floor. The door closed and locked behind him. Seraphina slid down the wall and sat among the scattered images. Faces stared up at her, accusing, pleading, dead or broken or lost. She picked up Rosa Martinez's photo, 14 years old, terrified eyes that looked older than they should. How many times had Lucian looked at Rosa? How many times had he signed off on the transaction that turned a child into merchandise? And how many times had Seraphina looked the other way while it happened? She gathered the photos carefully, stacked them, studied each face like a prayer or a confession, or maybe just an acknowledgement that these lives had mattered, even if nobody had protected them. 24 hours. Webb had given her 24 hours to decide who she wanted to be, the woman who survived at any cost, or the woman who finally paid the price for decades of silence. She was still sitting there surrounded by photos when the door opened again 6 hours later. Not Webb this time. Not Catherine. Elena Volkov stood in the doorway, leaning on a crutch, one arm in a sling, face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. She looked like she'd been through a war and barely survived. "How?" Seraphina started. "Checked myself out, against medical advice." Elena's voice was rough, like her throat had been damaged. "Had to see you before you made the biggest mistake of your life. You should be in the hospital. I should be dead. Your brother's men tried very hard to make that happen." Elena limped into the cell and sat heavily on the mattress. "But here I am, still breathing, still fighting. Elena, I'm sorry." "Don't. Don't apologize like that makes it better." Elena's eyes, one swollen nearly shut, fixed on Seraphina with intensity that was almost painful. "Catherine Price came to see you. I know what she offered. Recant your testimony. Protect Lucian. Save yourself." "How do you know that?" "Because it's what she always does. That's her specialty. Turning witnesses, making them doubt their own memories, convincing them that protecting monsters is the same as protecting themselves." Elena shifted, wincing. But I need you to understand something. If you protect Lucien, he wins. Everything we did, everything we risked, becomes meaningless. He's going to win anyway. Catherine says most of the evidence is inadmissible. Then we find more evidence. We keep fighting. We don't give up just because it's hard. Elena pulled out her phone with her good hand. I have something to show you. Something even your brother doesn't know I found. She pulled up a video file, pressed play. The footage was grainy, shot from a hidden camera. It showed a warehouse, girls lined up like cattle, men inspecting them like merchandise. And there, in the center of the frame, unmistakable even in the low light, Lucien Vale. He wasn't just signing off on transactions. He was there, personally overseeing the operation, making selections, negotiating prices. The timestamp on the video was 3 months ago. Seraphina felt bile rise in her throat. Where did you get this? I've been investigating your brother for 2 years, since before Dmitri died. This was Dmitri's insurance. He knew eventually Lucien would betray him, so he documented everything. Elena's voice shook. This video alone proves Lucien's involvement. Direct, personal, undeniable. Why didn't you show this to Webb? Because I wanted you to see it first. I wanted you to understand exactly what you're protecting if you recant your testimony. Elena closed the video. These girls in the photos Webb showed you, your brother put them there. Not through intermediaries, not through plausible deniability. He personally selected them and sold them and profited from their suffering. The cell felt too small, too hot. Seraphina couldn't breathe. I can't, she whispered. If I testify, I'm dead. Lucien will make sure of it, even from prison. So we make sure he never leaves prison. We make sure this video and your testimony and everything else builds a case so airtight he dies in a cell. Elena grabbed Seraphina's hand with her uninjured one. I know you're scared. I know you've spent your whole life being scared, but you have a chance right now to save people, to stop this. Don't waste it. What about Catherine's argument that I was coerced by you? It's bullshit. Webb knows it's bullshit. Any reasonable person knows it's bullshit. Elena squeezed harder. But you have to be brave enough to stand up in court and say it. You have to be willing to look your brother in the eye and tell the truth. Seraphina thought about Rosa Martinez, about the 14-year-old girl with terrified eyes who'd been sold and killed like she was nothing. She thought about the dozens of other girls in those photos, the hundreds who probably existed that nobody had documented yet. And she thought about spending the rest of her life knowing she could have stopped it and chose not to. Okay, she said. Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. Okay, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth. All of it. Elena's grip relaxed. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Good. Elena struggled to her feet. Webb's filing charges against Lucien tomorrow morning. Arraignment set for next week. You'll need to be ready. What about you? Catherine's going to destroy your credibility. Let her try. I've got video evidence and medical records proving what Lucien's men did to me. The jury will see I was tortured for getting too close to the truth. Elena moved toward the door. Besides, I'm not the one they're going to be watching. You are. The sister who finally chose justice over family. That's powerful testimony. She left before Seraphina could respond. Alone again, Seraphina looked at the scattered photos on the floor, at Rosa and Jessica and all the others whose names she'd never know. I'm sorry, she whispered to them. I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner. The photos didn't answer. They never would. But maybe that was the point. The dead couldn't forgive. The traumatized couldn't forget. The only thing Seraphina could do was make sure no more faces got added to the collection. She gathered the photos and put them back in the folder, held it against her chest like a shield, or maybe a reminder of why any of this mattered. Tomorrow she'd call Webb, tell him she was ready to cooperate fully, fuck Catherine Price and her manipulative arguments, fuck the Vale family and its legacy of blood. Seraphina was done being complicit. She lay back on the mattress and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come, but that was fine. She'd learned to function without it. At some point in the early hours, someone slid food through the slot in her door. She ate mechanically without tasting it. Fuel, nothing more. When morning light finally filtered through the high window, Webb appeared. He looked cautiously hopeful. Elena came to see you, he said. She showed me the video. And? I'm testifying. Everything. The Morrison murder. Lucien's operations. All of it. Seraphina stood. Catherine's going to fight this hard. Let her. We have more evidence than she knows about. And now we have you willing to tell the truth. Webb pulled out paperwork. I'm offering you full immunity on Morrison. Testimony-based. You testify truthfully and completely. You walk free. What about the other charges? Dropped. All of them. You become a cooperating witness instead of a defendant. He slid the papers through the slot. Read it carefully. Sign it. And then we start building the case that finally takes down Lucien Vale. Seraphina read every word twice. The legalese was dense, but the meaning was clear. Complete immunity in exchange for complete cooperation. She signed her name at the bottom. The paperwork disappeared back through the slot, and Webb smiled. Welcome to the right side of history. I don't care about history. I just want those girls to stop suffering. Then let's make sure they do. The next week passed in a blur of depositions and preparation. Webb's team was thorough. They went over every detail of her testimony, anticipated every attack Catherine would launch, built contingencies and fallback positions. Elena's video was authenticated by 3 separate forensic experts. The chain of custody was documented. The footage was damning and indisputable. Catherine filed motion after motion trying to suppress evidence, trying to discredit Elena, trying to paint Seraphina as an unreliable witness with obvious bias. Every motion was denied. Lucien's arraignment arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. They transported him from federal holding to the courthouse in an armored vehicle surrounded by armed guards. Media trucks lined the streets. Protesters held signs demanding justice. Inside the courtroom, Seraphina sat in the gallery next to Webb. She wore clothes Catherine would have hated, simple, modest, nothing expensive or designer. She looked like a victim instead of a Vale. When they brought Lucien in, he scanned the room until he found her. Their eyes met. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a parent watching a child make a terrible choice. Seraphina didn't look away. The judge read the charges. Racketeering, murder, trafficking, conspiracy. The list went on for 5 minutes. Each count carried a minimum of 10 years. How does the defendant plead? The judge asked. Catherine stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. These charges are fabricated, based on manufactured evidence and coerced testimony from witnesses with obvious bias. We'll be filing. Your motions are noted, Miss Price. The judge cut her off. Bail? The defense requests bail be set at $5 million. Mr. Vale is a respected businessman with deep ties to the community. The prosecution requests no bail. Webb interrupted. Mr. Vale is a flight risk with resources to disappear. He has connections to criminal organizations across multiple countries, and he poses a direct threat to witnesses. The judge didn't hesitate. No bail. Defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial. Next. Lucien sat down slowly. Handcuffed. Trapped. For the first time in his life, powerless. And Seraphina felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just a hollow ache where her family used to be. They led Lucien out through a side door. He looked back one more time before disappearing. Catherine appeared at Seraphina's shoulder. You just killed your brother. I hope you can live with that. I can live with it better than living with being his accomplice. We'll destroy you on the stand. Every contradiction, every inconsistency, every reason you had to lie. By the time I'm done, the jury won't believe a word you say. Then I guess we'll find out who's more convincing. The lawyer defending a trafficking operation, or the sister who finally found her conscience. Seraphina stood. Do your worst, Catherine. I'm done being scared. Catherine's expression hardened. You should be scared. Because when Lucien goes to prison, his organization doesn't just disappear. Someone will take over. And that someone will remember you're the reason their predecessor is locked up. Let them come. I've got federal protection. For how long? A year? 5 years? Eventually the marshals move on to other cases and you're alone again. And then Catherine snapped her fingers. One bullet, one car accident, one mysterious illness. You'll never see it coming. She walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Webb touched Seraphina's elbow. Don't let her get in your head. We'll keep you safe. Will you? Seraphina looked at him. Can you promise me that in 5 years I won't end up dead in a ditch somewhere? Webb's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Seraphina pulled away. When's the trial? 6 weeks. We need time to prepare, to go through all the evidence, to make sure every piece of testimony is airtight. 6 weeks of waiting. 6 weeks of looking over her shoulder. 6 weeks of wondering if Catherine was right, and this was all just delayed suicide. I'll be ready, Seraphina said. She walked out of the courthouse into cold morning air. Media descended immediately, cameras and microphones and shouted questions. Federal marshals surrounded her, creating a barrier between her and the crowd. Someone screamed that she was a traitor. Someone else called her a hero. Seraphina didn't acknowledge either. She climbed into the waiting vehicle and let them drive her to the safe house where she'd spend the next 6 weeks preparing to destroy her brother in open court. The safe house was a nondescript suburban home that looked exactly like every other house on the block. Inside it was sparse. Basic furniture, monitored phones, windows that didn't open all the way. A prison that looked like freedom. Seraphina sat on the couch and stared at the wall. Somewhere in the city, Lucien was sitting in a cell doing the same thing. Both of them trapped. Both of them waiting for a trial that would determine who got to write history. Her phone buzzed. New number. Blocked caller ID. Against her better judgment, she answered. Hello? Hello, little sister. Lucien's voice, calm, familiar, terrifying in its normality. How did you... I have resources you don't know about. People loyal to me who'd burn the world if I asked. He paused. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to give you one last chance. Chance for what? To remember who you are. Who we are. Family doesn't destroy family, Sarah. That's the one rule. The only rule that matters. You destroyed Mom. I saved Mom from herself. She was going to turn on us. Going to go to the authorities about things she didn't understand. I made it quick, painless. More mercy than she deserved. The casual admission of matricide should have shocked her. Instead, it just confirmed what Seraphina had always suspected. You're a monster, she said quietly. Maybe. But I'm your monster. I'm the one who kept you alive when Dad wanted you dead. I'm the one who protected you from every threat. I'm the one who killed for you when you were scared. Lucien's voice dropped lower. And now you're going to betray me, stand up in court and lie about me. I'm going to tell the truth. The truth. He laughed. You don't even know what truth is anymore. You've been drowning in lies so long you think they're oxygen. Then help me understand. Tell me those girls in the photos weren't real. Tell me the trafficking operation doesn't exist. Tell me you didn't murder Dmitry Volkov in cold blood. Silence. That's what I thought, Seraphina said. I did what I had to do to survive, to build something that would last, to create an empire that would protect our family for generations. Lucien's voice hardened. You think I enjoyed any of it? You think I wanted to get my hands dirty? I did it because someone had to, because the world is violent and cruel, and the only way to survive is to be more violent and more cruel than everyone else. That's not survival. That's becoming the thing you're afraid of. Maybe there's no difference. Another pause. 6 weeks, Sarah. That's how long you have to think about this. To remember who you really are underneath all the righteous indignation. And when you're sitting in that courtroom looking at me, ask yourself if destroying me is really going to make those girls' suffering matter, or if it's just going to create a power vacuum that someone worse will fill. Someone worse than you? There's always someone worse. That's the point. The line went quiet for a moment. I love you, little sister. I always have. And when this is over, when you're in witness protection hiding from the consequences of your choices, I want you to remember that everything I did was to keep you safe, even if you never understood it. The line went dead. Seraphina sat holding the phone, Lucien's words echoing in her head like a curse or a prophecy, or maybe just the truth she'd been running from her entire life. There was always someone worse, and maybe, by destroying Lucien, she was just making room for that someone to take his place. But it was too late to turn back now. She'd signed the paperwork, made her choice, committed to testifying. All she could do was follow through and hope that truth actually meant something in the end, even if she was starting to suspect it didn't. Outside the safe house window, the sun was setting. Seraphina watched it bleed red across the horizon and thought about blood and sacrifice and all the ways good intentions paved roads to places nobody wanted to go. In 6 weeks, she'd sit in a courtroom and tell the world exactly what kind of man her brother was. And then she'd spend the rest of her life wondering if she'd done the right thing or just traded one nightmare for another. The marshals outside were changing shifts. New faces. New guards. The same protection that was also imprisonment. Seraphina closed the curtains and sat in darkness, waiting for the trial that would either set her free or confirm that freedom was just another lie she'd been telling herself. 6 weeks felt like forever. It also felt like no time at all. The trial began on a Tuesday morning that felt like the end of the world. Seraphina sat in the witness preparation room wearing a navy suit that made her look smaller than she was. Webb paced in front of her, going over last-minute details while 2 federal marshals stood guard outside the door. "Catherine's going to try to rattle you," Webb said for the 10th time. "She'll bring up Morrison, your mother, every dark moment in your past. Don't let her get under your skin." "I know. And when you look at Lucien, don't let him intimidate you. He's going to try to make you feel guilty. Remind you that you're family, that you're betraying him." "I know." Seraphina's voice came out flat. She'd barely slept in 6 weeks. The nightmares were constant. Lucien's voice, Rosa Martinez's face, her mother drowning in a bathtub that filled with blood instead of water. "You ready?" She wasn't, would never be. But she nodded anyway. They walked through corridors that smelled like floor polish and desperation. The courtroom doors loomed ahead like the entrance to some ancient temple where sacrifices were performed. Inside, the gallery was packed. Media, victims' families, curious onlookers who'd followed the case obsessively. Every seat taken, standing room only, and there, at the defense table, sat Lucien. He wore a suit that somehow still looked expensive despite being prison-issued. His hair was shorter than she remembered. There were shadows under his eyes. But when he looked at her, his expression was the same one he'd worn when she was 7 and fell off her bike. Concern mixed with inevitability, like he'd always known she'd get hurt eventually. Seraphina took her seat in the witness box. The bailiff swore her in. Her hand shook when she raised it. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." The words felt like a marriage vow and a funeral rite at the same time. Webb approached first. His questions were gentle, designed to establish her credibility, background, family history, her relationship with Lucien. "How would you describe your brother?" Webb asked. Seraphina looked at Lucien. He met her gaze without blinking. "Complicated," she said. "He raised me after our mother died, protected me. But that protection always came with conditions I didn't understand until recently." "What kind of conditions?" "That I stay quiet, that I don't ask questions, that I accept his version of events even when I knew something was wrong." Her throat tightened. "He made me complicit by making me feel like I owed him my life." Webb walked her through the evidence. The files in the basement, Elena's testimony, the video showing Lucien at the trafficking warehouse. "Can you identify the man in this video?" Webb played the footage on screens around the courtroom. "That's my brother, Lucien Vale." "And what is he doing in this video?" "Inspecting girls who were being trafficked, selecting them, negotiating prices." The words tasted like ash. "He's not just ordering it done. He's there, participating." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge banged her gavel. Webb continued. "Did your brother ever discuss his trafficking operations with you?" "Not directly, but I saw evidence, heard conversations. He kept files on every operation, documentation of crimes going back decades." "And when you discovered this evidence, what did you do?" "I called you. I arranged the FBI raid. I chose to stop protecting him." Seraphina's voice cracked. "Even though I knew it meant destroying my family." Webb nodded. No further questions. Catherine Price rose like a predator catching a scent. She was immaculate in a gray suit that probably cost what most people made in 6 months. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Ms. Vale," she began, "or should I say Mrs. Voss, you seem confused about your own identity." "I go by Vale now, because your husband is in federal prison, for crimes your brother allegedly documented." Catherine paced. "Convenient how both men in your life ended up arrested. Almost like you have a pattern of destroying the people closest to you." "Objection," Webb said. "Argumentative." "Sustained." Catherine didn't miss a beat. "Let's talk about Richard Morrison. You asked your brother to kill him, didn't you?" Seraphina's stomach dropped. I told him what Morrison did to me. I didn't explicitly, but you knew what would happen. You knew your brother's methods. You knew he'd kill Morrison if you asked. Catherine leaned on the witness box. Didn't you? I was scared. That's not what I asked. Did you know your brother would kill Richard Morrison when you told him what happened? The courtroom held its breath. Yes, Seraphina whispered. I knew. So you ordered a murder, used your brother as the weapon, and now you're sitting here claiming moral superiority while testifying against him. Catherine's smile widened. That's quite hypocritical, isn't it? I'm not claiming moral superiority. I'm trying to stop more people from dying. Are you? Or are you just trying to save yourself from prosecution by turning state's witness? Catherine pulled out documents. You signed an immunity deal, complete protection from all charges related to Morrison's death, in exchange for your testimony against your brother. Yes. So you made a deal to avoid prison, to sacrifice your family for your freedom. Catherine's voice dripped contempt. How noble. It wasn't about nobility. Then what was it about? Revenge? Were you angry that your brother knew about Adrian's affairs and didn't tell you? Angry that he used your marriage for intelligence gathering? I was angry that he let me suffer, that he watched me break down and did nothing because it served his purposes. Seraphina's voice grew stronger. But this isn't about anger. It's about those girls, the ones in the photos, the ones he sold like cattle. Allegedly sold. The prosecution has yet to prove my client's direct involvement. Catherine shifted tactics. Let's talk about Elena Volkov. She lived in your brother's house for months, had complete access to his files, his computers, everything. Isn't it possible she fabricated evidence during that time? No, the forensic analysis can be fooled. Experts can be wrong. But let's assume the evidence is real. You still chose to believe a woman whose brother was murdered by Lucian, a woman with obvious motive to frame him. Catherine moved closer. Why would you trust her over your own family? Because she was telling the truth. Or because she told you what you wanted to hear, that you weren't complicit, that you were a victim, that destroying your brother would somehow absolve you of decades of silence. Catherine's voice dropped. But it doesn't, does it? You're still the girl who looked the other way, who benefited from blood money, who called her brother when she needed someone murdered. Seraphina felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. I'm trying to do the right thing now. Too late. The damage is done. The girls are already dead or broken. Your testimony won't bring them back. It'll just destroy the one person who ever actually protected you. Catherine turned to the jury. And when he's gone, when the Vale organization collapses, someone worse will take his place. Someone without any loyalty to you. Someone who'll remember that you're the reason their predecessor is rotting in prison. Objection! Webb was on his feet. Counsel is testifying. Withdrawn. Catherine smiled at Seraphina one more time. No further questions. Seraphina stepped down on shaking legs. She felt like she'd been flayed open, every weakness exposed, every crime acknowledged. The trial continued for 3 more days. Webb called witnesses, victims who'd escaped, agents who'd investigated, forensic experts who authenticated evidence. Each testimony built the case piece by piece. Catherine attacked them all with surgical precision, created doubt, pointed out inconsistencies, made the jury question everything. On the 4th day, Lucian took the stand. He was calm, almost serene. He answered Catherine's questions with measured responses that made him sound reasonable, misunderstood. A businessman whose legitimate operations had been infiltrated by criminals he'd been trying to stop. Did you traffic those girls? Catherine asked. No. I was investigating the operation, trying to gather evidence to take to the authorities. And the video showing you at the warehouse? I was there undercover, pretending to be a buyer so I could identify the real criminals. Lucian looked directly at the jury. I've done things I'm not proud of, made deals with dangerous people to protect my family, but I never hurt those girls. I was trying to save them. It was a masterful performance. Seraphina watched the jury's faces soften, watched doubt creep in. When Webb cross-examined, Lucian remained unshakable. Every question deflected, every accusation reframed. Mr. Vale, you admitted to killing Dmitry Volkov, Webb said. In self-defense. He tried to murder me. I defended myself. What about the files, the documentation of criminal operations? Insurance. Records I kept in case anyone tried to frame me, which is exactly what's happening now. Back and forth they went. Lucian never wavered, never broke. When he stepped down, Seraphina saw some jurors looking at him with sympathy instead of horror. The closing arguments came on a Friday. Webb was passionate and precise, walking the jury through evidence that proved beyond reasonable doubt that Lucian Vale was guilty of every charge. Catherine was equally compelling. She painted Lucien as a scapegoat, a man trying to protect his family who'd been betrayed by a sister with her own agenda. Seraphina Vale made a deal to save herself, Catherine told the jury. She sacrificed her brother to avoid prosecution, and now she expects you to believe her testimony despite the fact that she's already admitted to conspiracy to commit murder. She's not a credible witness. She's a desperate woman trying to justify her betrayal. The jury deliberated for 6 days. Seraphina spent those days in the safe house, pacing like a caged animal. Webb called with updates, but there was nothing to update. The jury was deadlocked, stuck, fighting over reasonable doubt. On the 6th day, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Seraphina sat behind Webb, hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. They brought Lucien in. He scanned the room until he found her, mouthed something she couldn't quite read. Maybe, "I love you," or maybe, "I told you so." "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreperson stood, an older woman with kind eyes who'd been impossible to read during the trial. "On the charge of racketeering, how do you find?" "Guilty." The word hit like a bullet. Seraphina stopped breathing. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder?" "Guilty." "On the charge of human trafficking?" "Guilty." They went through all 18 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. When it was done, Lucien's expression never changed. He just looked at Seraphina and nodded once, like he'd expected this, like he'd planned for it. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks out. They led Lucien away in handcuffs while the media erupted outside, and victims' families wept with relief or rage, or both. Webb touched Seraphina's shoulder. "You did it. You stopped him." She should have felt triumph, victory, something. Instead, she just felt empty. The sentencing hearing was smaller, fewer people, less media. The verdict was old news now. Victims testified about the impact of Lucien's crimes, mothers whose daughters had been taken, survivors who still woke up screaming, FBI agents who'd spent years chasing ghosts. Catherine argued for leniency. Lucien was a first-time offender. He'd shown remorse. He had family who depended on him. Webb argued for the maximum. Lucien was a danger to society, a predator who'd shown no mercy to his victims. The judge took less than 5 minutes to decide. "Mr. Vale, you've been convicted of 18 felony counts involving murder, trafficking, and racketeering. The evidence presented at trial was overwhelming. The harm you've caused is incalculable." She looked at him over her glasses. "I'm sentencing you to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will die in custody. Bailiff, remove the prisoner." Lucien stood, looked at Seraphina one last time. "I forgive you," he said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then they took him away forever. Seraphina walked out of the courthouse into cold afternoon air. The safe house was gone now. Witness protection was being arranged. In 3 days, she'd have a new name, new city, new life. Elena was waiting outside, still healing but standing without crutches now. "You did good," Elena said. "Did I?" Seraphina's voice was hollow. "He's gone. His organization's collapsing, but you were right about what Catherine said. Someone worse is already moving in. The trafficking doesn't stop. It just changes management." "Maybe. But at least we tried. At least those girls know someone fought for them." Elena touched her arm. "That matters, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. What happens to you?" "Witness protection too. Different city than yours. Fresh start." Elena smiled sadly. "Maybe we'll run into each other someday. 2 ghosts with new names." "Maybe." They stood there for a moment, 2 women who'd destroyed everything to do the right thing and weren't sure if it had mattered. Then Elena walked away and Seraphina was alone again. Webb drove her back to collect her things. The Vale estate was seized by the government. Everything inside would be auctioned off to compensate victims. "You can go in one last time," Webb said, "if you want to grab anything personal." Seraphina walked through the front doors of her childhood home, knowing she'd never see it again. The house felt dead already, empty. The ghosts had moved out or maybe just gone quiet. She went to her old bedroom, looked at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, remembered being 7 years old and afraid of the dark and thinking her brother was a hero instead of a monster. She took nothing with her, left it all behind like she was leaving herself behind. 3 days later, Emma Carson boarded a plane to Vancouver. That was her new name, her new identity. Emma had no family, no history, no connection to the Vale Empire or the trial or any of it. Emma was nobody, which meant Emma was free. The apartment they set her up with was small but clean. Ground floor, easy escape routes. Federal marshals checked in weekly at first, then monthly, then barely at all as years passed and no threats materialized. Emma got a job at a bookstore, sold paperbacks to customers who never asked about her past, made small talk about the weather and new releases and whether the coffee shop down the street was any good. It was the most normal she'd ever been. Years passed like water. 5, then 7, then 10. Emma Carson lived quietly, dated occasionally but never seriously, made friends who knew nothing about her real life, went to therapy and learned how to sleep through the night without nightmares. She never forgot the trial, never stopped thinking about Rosa Martinez and the other girls, never stopped wondering if she'd actually helped them, or just made herself feel better about decades of complicity. Then one winter morning, she saw the news report. Lucien Vale had been found dead in his cell, murdered by another inmate, gang retaliation. Prison officials were investigating, but the killer was in solitary and not talking. Emma stood in her apartment watching the report loop on the news, seeing her brother's face, hearing reporters speculate about whether his death was connected to his criminal empire or just random prison violence. She should have felt something. Relief, grief, vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. Because Lucien dying didn't change anything. The girls were still dead or traumatized. Adrian was still in prison. Her mother was still murdered. All the destruction was permanent. And Emma was still Emma. Still running, still hiding, still pretending she'd escaped. She turned off the TV and got ready for work. The bookstore was quiet that morning. 3 customers total. Emma shelved returns and helped an older woman find a mystery novel and rang up a college student buying textbooks. Normal. Ordinary. Forgettable. At lunch, she walked to the park near her apartment, sat on a bench watching people live their lives, parents with children, teenagers throwing frisbees, an old couple holding hands. None of them knew what she'd done, who she'd been, what it cost to sit here in this moment of peace. And maybe that was the point. Maybe peace was just forgetting you ever deserved anything else. A woman sat down next to her, mid-30s, dark hair, face partially hidden behind sunglasses. "Emma Carson," the woman said. Not a question. Emma's blood went cold. She calculated escape routes without looking. "You have the wrong person." "No, I don't. I've been looking for you for 3 years." The woman pulled off her sunglasses. Elena Volkov, older now, more scarred, but alive. "How did you find me?" Emma breathed. "I'm very good at finding people. Learned from the best." Elena gestured to the park. "You've built a nice life here. Quiet, safe. Everything you wanted." "What do you want?" "To tell you something you need to hear." Elena turned to face her directly. Lucien's organization collapsed after he went to prison. Most of his lieutenants were arrested or killed. The trafficking networks were disrupted, not destroyed. You were right about that. But hundreds of girls were freed, rescued because of the evidence we provided. Emma's throat tightened. Hundreds? 347 according to the FBI's final count. Girls who would still be in hell if we hadn't done what we did. Elena's voice softened. "I know you think it didn't matter, that you just traded one monster for another, but those 347 girls got their lives back because of you. Because of us." "No, because of you. I wanted revenge. You wanted justice. There's a difference." Elena stood. "I won't bother you again. I just thought you should know that what you did mattered. More than you'll ever know. She started to walk away. Wait. Emma stood. Are you okay? Are you safe? Elena smiled. It was the first genuine smile Emma had seen on her face. I'm alive. That's enough. Then she disappeared into the crowd. Emma sat back down on the bench. 347 girls, 347 lives that weren't destroyed because she'd made one hard choice. It didn't erase the guilt, didn't bring back the dead, didn't undo decades of complicity, but maybe, it meant something anyway. She sat there until the sun started setting, watched the sky turn gold and red and purple, watched the park slowly empty as people went home to families and lives and futures. When full dark came, Emma Carson walked back to her apartment, made dinner, watched TV, went to bed at a reasonable hour, and for the first time in 10 years she slept through the night without dreaming about Rosa Martinez's terrified eyes. In the morning she woke up and went to work, sold books, made small talk, lived her small, quiet, ordinary life. She didn't visit Lucien's grave, didn't reach out to anyone from her old life, didn't try to find Elena again. She just existed, day after day, week after week, year after year, and slowly, so slowly she barely noticed, the weight on her chest began to lift. Not all the way. Probably never all the way. But enough. Enough that she could breathe without counting. Enough that she could smile at customers without forcing it. Enough that she could imagine, someday, maybe having a future that wasn't defined by her past. On the 10-year anniversary of the trial, Emma took a day off work. She drove to the ocean, 3 hours north, and stood on the beach watching waves crash against rocks. She thought about her mother drowning in a bathtub, about Adrian rotting in prison, about Lucien murdered in his cell, about Elena scarred but surviving, about 347 girls who got second chances. And she thought about herself, about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become and the woman she might still manage to be. The wind was cold. The sky was gray. The ocean was violent and beautiful and indifferent. Emma stood there until her feet went numb, until the sun began its descent toward the horizon, until she felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly, but acceptance. She couldn't undo the past, couldn't save the people who were already dead, couldn't make herself innocent again. But she could keep living, keep trying, keep being a person who'd made terrible choices and was learning to forgive herself for them. That wasn't redemption. Redemption was a fantasy for people who'd never actually done anything that needed forgiving. This was just survival, the messy, unglamorous, painful kind that meant waking up every day and choosing to keep going despite knowing you didn't deserve it. But 347 girls had gotten their lives back. And Emma Carson, Seraphina Vale, whatever name she wore, had helped make that happen. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was something. And maybe something was all anyone could hope for in the end. She turned away from the ocean and drove back to the city, back to her apartment, back to her quiet life. And she kept living. Because living was the only revenge against all the people who'd wanted her dead or broken or silent. She lived. She breathed. She survived. And after losing everything, her marriage, her family, her name, and the only home she'd ever known, survival became the closest thing to freedom she would ever have. Not because the pain disappeared, not because she found redemption, not because anything was ever truly okay, but because she learned that sometimes just waking up and facing another day was the bravest thing a person could do. And some days, that had to be enough.